Chapter 13-17. Although the Heaven Evasion sect was a human sect and was hidden deep within the Eastern Sea's ruins, the Eastern Sea's ruins was the Eastern Sea's ruins. However, the entire Eastern Sea was under the jurisdiction of the Water Race's imperial court. For the Heaven Evasion sect to be able to survive in the ruins of ruins for 3,000 years, they naturally had to rely on the Water Race's imperial court for permission and protection. Thus, every 10 years, the Heaven Evasion sect had to hand over a batch of priceless tributes to the Water Race's imperial court. Old ancestor Sanju and the Golden Dragon Emperor had known each other since 1,000 years ago. Although the relationship between the two was that of a ruler and a subject, the two of them didn't meet many times, so their relationship couldn't be considered close. However, the two of them still had some friendship, so the Golden Dragon Emperor was willing to give old ancestor Sanju face and come to the Nine Heavens platform. As soon as the two of them met, the Golden Dragon Emperor went straight to the point and asked about old ancestor Sanju's intentions. Old ancestor Sanju didn't beat around the bush and pointed at the Nine Heavens platform not far away, explaining, "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, the surprise I mentioned is on the Nine Heavens platform." The Golden Dragon Emperor was no stranger to the Nine Heavens platform and had come here several times in the past 1,000 years. However, he knew how mysterious and terrifying the Nine Heavens platform was and never dared to enter it. He had to be careful even when he approached the Nine Heavens platform. At this moment, he turned to look at the Nine Heavens platform and carefully observed it for a moment before asking with a frown, "There's nothing above the Nine Heavens platform and it's the same as usual. Where did the surprise come from?" Old ancestor Sanju revealed a playful smile and stroked his beard. "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, don't be anxious and listen to my explanation. 3 months ago, a bastard snuck into our sect and started a massacre. He killed our left and right protectors and many elders and deacons. I was cultivating in seclusion when the elders knocked on my door and woke me up. Thus, I brought the sect master and worked together to hunt that bastard down. We chased him all the way here." Progenitor Sanju briefly explained what had happened to Qin Nan. Of course, he didn't reveal the reason for the battle, nor did he mention Ji Tianqing's identity and name. He emphasized that Ji Tianqing had a divine black dragon divine beast and a peerless divine sword. Most importantly, after Ji Tianqing escaped to the Nine Heavens platform, not only was he not killed by the divine lightning, he even used the power of the divine lightning to temper his body, making him even more powerful. Even the Golden Dragon Emperor, who was knowledgeable, was dumbstruck by Patriarch Sanju's words. What? That person actually took the initiative to trigger the divine thunder of the ninth heaven. Even after being struck by the divine thunder, he can still cultivate and become stronger? Golden Dragon Emperor's eyes widened in shock as he stared intently at the Nine Heavens platform. Old ancestor Sanju nodded repeatedly and added fuel to the fire. "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, that kid has a divine beast, Black Dragon, but the Dragon Clan is your people. How can they be enslaved by him? Moreover, the reason he was able to enter the Ninth Heaven platform and withstand the divine lightning was all thanks to the divine sword. That divine dragon and that divine sword should belong to you. Only a peerless sovereign and wise ruler like you is worthy of possessing such peerless divine items. Most importantly, in the thousands of years since ancient times, who has been able to decipher the secrets of the Nine Heavens platform? That kid was able to cultivate and become stronger in the Nine Heavens platform. He must have grasped the secrets of the Nine Heavens platform. If you can obtain this secret, you will be able to benefit the Water Clan." Old ancestor Sanju's words were undoubtedly very tempting. The Golden Dragon Emperor's blood was boiling, and his heart was filled with a strong desire and anticipation. But how wise was the Golden Dragon Emperor? How could he not see through old ancestor Sanju's intentions? He looked at old ancestor Sanju with a cold smile and said in a mocking tone, "Since this has already happened 3 months ago, why did you only inform me 10 days ago? You must have wanted to take the Black Dragon and the Divine Sword for yourself, but you couldn't do anything to that kid. You had no choice but to report this matter to me, right?" Old ancestor Sanju's face was filled with awkwardness. He smiled slightly and said humbly, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor's foresight is truly divine. You truly are the peerless sovereign of the East Seath." The Golden Dragon Emperor glanced at him indifferently and waved his hand. "Enough nonsense. Where is that kid now? The Nine Heavens platform is clearly empty." Old ancestor Sanju hurriedly explained, "This matter is even more mysterious. 11 days ago, that kid used the power of lightning to turn the entire Nine Heavens platform purple. After that, a huge teleportation gate appeared on the Nine Heavens platform. That kid entered the teleportation gate and disappeared. The Golden Dragon Emperor frowned and glared coldly at old ancestor Sanju. He said in a deep voice, "You dare to trick me? That kid must have left through the teleportation gate. He has already been gone for 11 days. What's the point of me coming here now?" This. Old ancestor Sanju saw that the Golden Dragon Emperor was angry and was filled with fear. He wanted to explain, but he was powerless. He racked his brain for a while and came up with a lame excuse. He hurriedly said, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, none of us know the secrets of the Nine Heavens platform. This one guesses that the kid might have returned to the Nine Heavens platform. Even if he has already escaped far away, this matter is too mysterious. I will definitely have to report it to you. Only with your wisdom and talent can you unravel the mystery behind this. You old bastard." The Golden Dragon Emperor cursed. He wanted to reprimand him, but he didn't know where to start. After all, old ancestor Sanju's attitude was very respectful and he was flattering him. He was caught off guard. Right at that moment, the Nine Heavens platform suddenly flashed and a black light appeared. The Golden Dragon Emperor and old ancestor Sanju remained silent. They stared at the black light with sharp eyes and carefully observed it. In order to see it more clearly, the Golden Dragon Emperor flew to the pitch-black mountain peak and stood at the edge of the Nine Heavens platform. Old ancestor Sanju hurriedly followed and stood beside the Golden Dragon Emperor. He pointed at the mysterious black light and said excitedly, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, look! It's that divine sword. It has finally appeared." The Golden Dragon Emperor stared at the black light and carefully examined it. Sure enough, he saw a 3-foot-long pitch-black treasured sword within the black light. He originally thought that when the treasured sword appeared, the Nine Heavens platform would react and send down a bolt of divine lightning. However, the Nine Heavens platform remained calm and tranquil. There was nothing out of the ordinary. The pitch-black treasured sword only stopped for a moment before flying into the sky like lightning. It crossed the bottomless abyss and flew into the distance. Seeing this, old ancestor Sanju anxiously shouted, "Your Highness Dragon Emperor, that's the divine sword. Quickly stop it. You mustn't let it escape." The Golden Dragon Emperor was also shocked. His eyes were filled with anticipation and his body flashed as he teleported over. After 2 breaths, the pitch-black treasured sword crossed the bottomless abyss and the pitch-black mountain peak and finally left the Nine Heavens platform. However, it was stopped by the Golden Dragon Emperor when it flew over the sea. Chapter 13:18. When the path of the burial of heaven was blocked, it turned around without hesitation and flew in the other direction. Whoosh! It was extremely fast. Like a black streak of light, it tore through the sky and flew 20 miles in an instant. Ancestor 3 Extinction chased after it with all his might, but he was left further and further behind. It was impossible for him to catch up in a short time. However, the Golden Dragon Emperor's methods were extraordinary. As expected of a nascent soul supreme, his figure flashed and turned into a streak of golden light, teleporting continuously in the sky. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! Every time the golden light flickered, he could cross 100 miles in the sky and teleport close to 100 miles away. Such terrifying speed was something the Sword of Burial of Heaven couldn't compare to. In just 3 short breaths, the Sword of Burial of Heaven was stopped by the Golden Dragon Emperor on the surface of the sea hundreds of miles away. Heaven-shaking claw! The Golden Dragon Emperor roared and raised his palm, sending out a golden light that covered the sky. It turned into a giant golden dragon claw that descended from the sky and grabbed at the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Suddenly, the space within a radius of dozens of miles was sealed by an invisible force. The Sword of Burial of Heaven's speed suddenly slowed, as if it had fallen into a quagmire. It struggled with all its might but couldn't escape. The golden dragon claw that blotted out the sky gradually closed in and was about to grab the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Ancestor 3 Extinction just happened to rush over and saw this scene. He was immediately filled with excitement and shouted emotionally, "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, that kid and the divine black dragon are hiding in the divine sword." The Golden Dragon Emperor knew what was going on and used all his strength to capture and seal the Sword of Burial of Heaven. A moment later, the giant golden dragon claw slowly tightened and captured the Sword of Burial of Heaven. The Golden Dragon Emperor controlled the giant dragon claw to grab the Sword of Burial of Heaven and fly it back to him. The Sword of Burial of Heaven struggled with all its might, but it couldn't break free from the dragon claw. It could only give up for the time being. The Golden Dragon Emperor examined the Sword of Burial of Heaven at close range. He observed the material and patterns on the blade and felt the sword's aura. He immediately revealed a look of surprise. A peak top-grade soul weapon, a half-step divine artifact. A broken sword? Why was it a broken sword? If it was only a half-step divine artifact, how could it withstand the 9 heavens' divine lightning without collapsing? No, there's something wrong with this broken sword. It's definitely a magical treasure that surpasses the primordial spirit realm. Previously, when the Golden Dragon Emperor heard Patriarch Sanju say that the sword was a divine artifact, he thought that it was a primordial spirit artifact. After all, at the Tianxian land, primordial soul stage treasures were the top and publicly recognized divine weapons. However, he was experienced and knowledgeable. After observing the Sword of Burial of Heaven with his own eyes, he could tell that this sword was extraordinary. It was definitely not some primordial soul-level sword. When Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes heard his words, he hurriedly came over and looked at the Burial of Heaven with a greedy gaze. Of course, he lowered his head slightly to conceal the greed in his eyes, not daring to show it in front of the Golden Dragon Emperor. Your Majesty Dragon Emperor, I've long noticed that this sword is extraordinary. It's a peerless divine sword. Now, you only need to kill that brat and you'll be able to obtain the divine sword and a divine black dragon. As Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes tempted the Golden Dragon Emperor and urged him to kill Ji Tianqing, he carefully observed the Golden Dragon Emperor's expression. Although the Golden Dragon Emperor did not understand the situation, he would not be blinded by joy. He saw through Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's intentions and said indifferently, "As for how to deal with this divine sword and the black dragon, I'll decide. There's no need for you to tell me what to do. This matter ends here. I'm going to take the divine sword back to the Imperial Court. You can leave now." Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was stunned and cursed in his heart. "Damn you, Golden Dragon Emperor. You're burning the bridge after crossing the river and chasing me away after obtaining the divine sword? This won't do. I have to see him kill Ji Tianqing before I can be at ease." Seeing that Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was unwilling to leave, the Golden Dragon Emperor comforted him again. "Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes, I appreciate your kindness. The Imperial Court owes you a favor. If you encounter any difficulties in the future or if your life is in danger, I promise to save your life. How about it?" After receiving the Golden Dragon Emperor's promise, Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes felt much better. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." The Golden Dragon Emperor ignored him and turned to leave. However, at this moment, the Burial of Heaven flashed and a figure appeared out of thin air. Whoosh! This was a young man in a white robe. He appeared in the sky without any warning and stood in front of the Golden Dragon Emperor and Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes. The white-robed young man was 8 feet tall and had a tall figure. He had a handsome face and an invisible aura emitted from his body, making him look especially mysterious and noble. He looked at the Golden Dragon Emperor with a smile and said in a playful tone, "Your Majesty, I trust you've been well since we last met. Where are you taking me?" The Golden Dragon Emperor and Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes were stunned. Both of them widened their eyes and stared at the white-robed young man. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was the most agitated. His eyes were bloodshot as he gritted his teeth and shouted, "You damn bastard, you finally can't hide it anymore? It's time for you to die." The Golden Dragon Emperor was also stunned. He revealed an expression of disbelief and said, "You're Ji Tianqing. How could it be you?" Ji Tianqing looked at Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes with a playful gaze and said to the Golden Dragon Emperor, "Of course it's me. Other than me, who else would have a black dragon and a divine sword? Other than me, who else could kill the sect master and guardian elder of the Heaven Evasion sect and make Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes hate me to the core?" The Golden Dragon Emperor was stunned. He looked at him deeply and sighed with a complicated expression. "Yes, other than you, the #1 monster in the world, who else would have such great ability? No wonder when I saw this divine sword, I vaguely felt a sense of déjà vu. When Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes told me about your enmity with the Heaven Evasion sect, I should have guessed that it was you." Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He cupped his hands and asked, "Your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor, can you return the treasured sword to me now?" The Golden Dragon Emperor came back to his senses and smiled awkwardly. He quickly handed the Sword of Burial of Heaven to him. "I didn't think that this was a misunderstanding. Since that's the case, This divine sword should be returned to its rightful owner. Ji Tianqing didn't hesitate and quickly took the sword of burial of heaven back. Old Ancestor 3 Absolute stood to the side and looked at Ji Tianqing and the Golden Dragon Emperor talking cheerfully. He was dumbfounded. He looked at Ji Tianqing and then at the Golden Dragon Emperor. He said with an embarrassed expression, You know each other? Hearing his words, the two of them turned their heads to look at him. The Golden Dragon Emperor was expressionless, but his eyes were a bit gloomy. Ji Tianqing smiled coldly and explained, That's right. More than a year ago, I went to the Water Race Imperial Court to pay a visit to your Majesty Golden Dragon Emperor. Moreover, the Crown Prince of the Water Race Imperial Court, Prince Tai Yi, is my sworn brother. When he heard this, Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's face turned pale. His eyes were filled with deep regret. At this moment, he knew that he had kicked an iron plate. Chapter 13:19. Just as Ancestor Sanju was feeling regretful, the Golden Dragon Emperor's expression changed as he remembered something. He cupped his hands at Ji Tianqing and said sincerely, Tianqing, when you mentioned Tai, this emperor recalled the previous matter. The demon race infiltrated the East Sea and caused a bloodbath. They slaughtered tens of millions of people and caused hundreds of millions of our people to lose their homes. Fortunately, you helped Tai quell the chaos in the East Sea and eliminate the evil demon race experts. If you hadn't appeared in time, the entire East Sea would have been in danger. The consequences would have been unimaginable. Here, this emperor represents all the people of the water race to express my deep gratitude to you. After saying that, the Golden Dragon Emperor bowed solemnly to Ji Tianqing to express his gratitude. Ji Tianqing raised his hands, indicating that the Golden Dragon Emperor could dispense with the formalities. Seeing this scene, Ancestor Sanju's expression became even more unsightly. His eyes were filled with deep shock. He never would have thought that Ji Tianqing was not only the sworn brother of the water race's crown prince, but also the imperial court of the water race owed him such a great favor. If he had known this earlier, he definitely wouldn't have reported it to the Golden Dragon Emperor. He was digging his own grave. Ancestor Sanju's intestines turned green with regret. He only wanted to turn around and run away. However, Ji Tianqing stared at him and released an invisible spiritual power to suppress him. Ancestor Sanju, you old thing, you're really despicable. You're simply despicable to the extreme. You want to steal my divine sword and black dragon, but you know that you're not strong enough, so you want to kill with a borrowed knife. You want to use His Majesty the Dragon Emperor? This is good. I'll let His Majesty personally witness how you die under my sword. As he spoke, Ji Tianqing held the burial of heaven's sword in his hand. His entire body surged with killing intent as he prepared to attack. Ancestor Sanju's expression changed. Deep hatred surged in his eyes, and his entire body emitted a biting cold killing intent. You little bastard, you're actually the one who's the bad guy first. Since that's the case, let His Majesty the Dragon Emperor be the witness. We'll settle this grudge here. You cruelly killed our sect master, left and right protectors, and many elders. Today, I'll cut you into pieces to avenge them. Instantly, the atmosphere became tense and filled with killing intent. The sea within a radius of 100 miles was swept up by a terrifying hurricane, and huge waves of 1,000 feet were swept up. That was the impact of the collision between Ji Tianqing and Ancestor Sanju's souls. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes knew that Ji Tianqing's strength had increased several times after being tempered by the divine lightning. However, he was an expert at the half-step essence soul realm. How could he be afraid of a junior? Of course, he couldn't. The Dragon Emperor. The Dragon Emperor. As expected, the Dragon Emperor couldn't sit still. He looked at Ji Tianqing and then at Ancestor Sanju. He immediately frowned. He stretched out his hands and gestured for the two to stop. He said in a dignified tone, Tianqing Ancestor Sanju, I don't know about the grudge between the two of you. I won't stop you from settling your grudge. I'll also remain neutral and not help either side. However, the two of you can't die. As long as I'm here, I won't let either of you kill the other. After today, you can do whatever you want. The Dragon Emperor's attitude was very clear. Ji Tianqing and Ancestor Sanju could settle their grudge, but neither of them could be killed. If Ji Tianqing was killed, he would have let down Tai, the people of the Water Tribe, and his own conscience. If Ancestor Sanju was killed, he would have gone back on his word. He wouldn't be the emperor of the imperial court of the water tribe. After all, he had just promised Ancestor Sanju that he would save him if his life was in danger. After making his stance clear, he retreated far away and stood high in the sky to watch the battle. Ji Tianqing and Ancestor Sanju were stunned for a moment and frowned in dissatisfaction. If they couldn't kill each other, how could it be called settling their grudge? The two sides had already formed a blood feud. It could only end with one of them dying. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, he remembered something. Previously, when he was reading the ancient books in the Heavenly Book Pavilion, he had seen an ancient secret technique that was very powerful and domineering. Thinking of that secret technique, he immediately had an idea. Even if I can't kill Ancestor Sanju, I have a way to make him suffer a fate worse than death. After making up his mind, he no longer hesitated. His body burst out with golden light that shot into the sky. He waved the broken sword and charged towards Ancestor Sanju. Old thief, take this. Swoosh. Ji Tianqing suddenly pulled out the Burial of Heaven and slashed out a dazzling sword light that was hundreds of feet long towards Ancestor Sanju. On the surface, this sword-drawing technique looked no different from before. However, the power of the sword light was 6 times stronger. Moreover, the blazing white sword light contained the power of purple lightning. Ancestor Sanju was thinking about how to resolve the hatred in his heart without killing Ji Tianqing. When the sword light attacked, he came back to his senses. His expression immediately changed and his eyes became extremely serious. Without hesitation, he waved his palms and struck out 2 giant golden palms to block the sword light. Bang! Bang! With 2 muffled sounds, the giant golden palms were shattered by the sword light. The power of the purple lightning sword light did not decrease. It struck Ancestor Sanju and sent him flying. At that moment, his magic power shield was shattered. The power of the divine lightning in the sword light turned into tens of thousands of electric arcs and drilled into his body. Lightning bolts flashed crazily, making crackling sounds. He was charred black on the spot. His body was stiff and numb. He could not use any magic power. He drew an arc in the sky and crashed into the sea below in a wretched state. However, he was a half-step Essence Soul Realm expert after all. He came to his senses in an instant. His body emitted a dazzling golden light as he charged into the sky. That damned bastard. He really does control the power of lightning. Ancestor Sanju bellowed in shock. Black smoke spewed out of his mouth. His blackened face looked extremely comical. At that moment, Ji Tianqing charged over again. He stabbed out with the sword of Burial of Heaven. Swish! A cold white light with hints of purple flashed before disappearing instantly. Ancestor Sanju had seen how terrifying this sword technique was and was already prepared. He hurriedly retreated and used all his strength to shrink his defense. He took out a superior-grade soul-level Dharma treasure and used it to block in front of him. It was a grayish-brown flag. It had all sorts of effects and magical uses. Its defense was impressive as well. However, when the cold light suddenly exploded, the flag was blown to pieces on the spot. It turned into countless shards that splattered everywhere. Boom! The dazzling cold light, wrapped in tens of thousands of bolts of purple lightning, exploded in the sky and affected a radius of several hundred kilometers. Ancestor Sanju was at the center of the explosion. He obviously suffered the most. He was blown away on the spot. Over a dozen cracks appeared on his body as blood spurted out. Chapter 13:20. Patriarch 3 Absolute's heart was crumbling. 3 months ago, he was the one who chased after Ji Tianqing and forced Ji Tianqing to enter the 9 Heavens platform. Back then, Ji Tianqing was not his match at all and was trampled on by him. But now, in a short span of 3 months, the situation of both sides had reversed. Right from the start, he was beaten back repeatedly by Ji Tianqing. He was in a sorry state and his injuries were miserable. Ji Tianqing only used 2 moves to beat him until he was covered in injuries and vomiting blood. His heart was filled with grief and fury, but he had to admit a fact. Ji Tianqing's combat strength had surpassed his in all aspects. Damned little bastard. How can your strength increase by 7 or 8 times in a short 3 months? This doesn't make sense. It's impossible. Patriarch 3 Absolutes charged into the sky once more, glaring at Ji Tianqing with bloodshot eyes and roaring hysterically. His body was pitch black and emitted smoke. With a shake of his body, black ash would scatter. 5 kilometers away, Ji Tianqing stood above the sea and stared at him coldly. He sneered. Nothing is impossible. Common sense is meant to be broken. Back then, you chased me across half of the sinkhole and forced me here. Today, I'll let you have a taste of fear and despair. With that, he unleashed 100% of his strength and swung his sword fiercely towards Patriarch 3 Absolutes, who was 5 kilometers away. Sword-wielding stance. The world was shocked when the sword was unleashed, sword chi spanning 30,000 kilometers. The burial of heaven slashed out a huge white sword light with hints of purple. It was 100,000 feet long and looked like a crescent moon. In that instant, the sea region was illuminated by a blinding white light. Clouds surged in the sky and the sun and moon lost their light. Huge waves surged on the surface of the sea. An incomparably domineering and sharp sword chi spread out in all directions, forming an invisible storm. That crescent-shaped sword light was terrifyingly powerful, causing people to tremble in fear. Old Ancestor Sanju's pupils constricted as a deep sense of fear flashed through his eyes. Without any hesitation, he used his secret technique to block with all his might, hoping to neutralize this sword technique. Both of his hands were forming strange hand seals, drawing arcs of golden light in the air as he condensed the seals at the fastest speed possible. In the blink of an eye, the thousands of golden light lines formed a seal with a radius of 10 miles. This seal was extremely ancient and complex. Ordinary soul refinement realm experts wouldn't be able to understand it at all. When the seal was formed, Forefather 3 Extremes let out a thunderous roar, mountain-suppressing command. Immediately, the seal lit up with a dazzling golden light, condensing into a huge golden mountain with a radius of 10 miles, smashing down towards Ji Tianqing from the sky. Boom! The crescent-shaped sword light collided with the 10 miles golden mountain in the sky, creating a loud explosion that shook the heavens. The incomparably heavy and majestic golden mountain looked very majestic, and its defensive power was super strong. However, this golden mountain only lasted for a moment before it was cut in half by the crescent-shaped sword light and shattered into pieces. Tens of thousands of golden fragments rained down from the sky, smashing into the sea below with a plop. The crescent-shaped sword light had already pierced through the sky and landed on Patriarch 3 Extremes. Bang! With a dull thud, Patriarch 3 Extremes was blown away once more as he vomited blood. A few more wounds appeared on his body, so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood constantly gushed out. His injuries had become even more wretched. He was now covered in wounds and blood, and his strength rapidly drained away. The violent power of lightning had already seeped through his body, passing through his charred skin and flesh to strike his meridians and bone marrow. In the blink of an eye, his meridians and bone marrow had been reduced to charcoal. As a result, his body was on the brink of destruction. Only his organs remained intact. No matter how furious and unwilling he was forced to accept reality. Right now, he could only be trampled on by Ji Tianqing. If this continued, once Ji Tianqing used the fourth strike, his organs would be destroyed as well. His entire body would be destroyed. As a result, he could no longer care about his face and dignity. He immediately chose to flee. Swoosh! He unleashed all his strength and turned into a golden streak of light, flying away as quickly as he could. However, Ji Tianqing had expected him to flee. He had blocked the path ahead and waited for him. Soul Slash! Ji Tianqing roared coldly. He instantly released 7 soul magic swords and slashed at Patriarch 3 Extremes. The 7 soul magic swords were all dazzling white. They contained dense purple lightning and were surrounded by dazzling lightning. Whoosh 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 whoosh. The 7 soul magic swords danced rapidly, sealing off an area of 5 kilometers and drowning out Patriarch 3 Extremes. Although there were only 7 soul magic swords, they transformed into tens of thousands of sword lights, weaving into a huge sword net and crazily attacking Patriarch 3 Extremes. The Golden Dragon Emperor could not see the scene inside the sword net, but he could hear muffled bangs and Patriarch 3 Extremes' miserable cries. Seeing this scene, he immediately frowned. His pupils constricted, and a deep sense of shock surged from his eyes. Patriarch 3 Extremes has lived for 2,000 years. His strength has reached the half-step primordial soul realm. His cultivation is extremely profound and can be said to be invincible below the primordial soul realm. I really did not expect Ji Tianqing to be able to suppress him and trample on him so easily. This is too terrifying. Ji Tianqing is so young, yet he already has such a shocking strength. This kind of talent and aptitude is simply not seen in 10,000 years, and is rarely seen since ancient times. These thoughts flashed through the Golden Dragon Emperor's mind. He stared at Ji Tianxing in disbelief. In troubled times, such a peerless monster has appeared in the human race. This is really the imperial court's blessing, the human race's blessing. It's a pity that my son, Tai Yi, does not have such talent and cannot be compared to him. Otherwise, I can be at ease. Thinking of this, the Golden Dragon Emperor's heart surged with envy and regret. If his son could be as monstrous as Ji Tianxing, he would not have to worry about leaving the East Sea. Even if he died in battle in the northern desert, he would have no regrets. The Golden Dragon Emperor's imagination ran wild for a while before he came back to his senses. He saw that the sword net flickering with lightning had not dissipated and was still strangling Patriarch 3 Extremes. However, Patriarch 3 Extremes was no longer breathing. Not even a scream could be heard. He suddenly woke up from a dream and his expression changed. Oh no, Patriarch 3 Extremes couldn't have been killed by Ji Tianxing, right? Thinking of this, he waved his palms without hesitation and struck out 2 golden dragon claws that blotted out the sky and the sun, grabbing at the huge sword net. Tianxing, stop. Although the sword net was extremely mysterious, it could not block the attack of a primordial soul supremacy. Crack! With a loud and clear sound, the 2 huge golden dragon claws tore the lightning sword net in half. Chapter 13:21. Ji Tianxing was truly invincible below the primordial soul stage. Even a half-step primordial soul stage powerhouse like Patriarch Sanju was easily crushed and ravaged by him. However, he still did not know how far he was from a primordial soul stage powerhouse. Now, the Golden Dragon Emperor had made his move. With a domineering and forceful stance, he directly tore apart the sword net formed by his spirit sword technique. He could clearly feel that unparalleled, violent, and ferocious power. It was like a huge mountain that could not be shaken. It was obvious that there was still a huge gap between him and a primordial soul stage powerhouse. There was an insurmountable gap between them. After a while, the sword light that covered the sky dissipated, and Patriarch Sanju's figure appeared. Seeing his miserable state, the Golden Dragon Emperor could not help but gasp. His expression also became somewhat complicated. Patriarch Sanju's injuries were simply too terrible. His physical body had not collapsed, but it was completely black. His internal organs, flesh, blood, and bone had all been charred. Moreover, his 4 limbs had been chopped off. His entire body was covered in cracks and holes, like a sieve that was full of holes. The Golden Dragon Emperor sighed inwardly. With such injuries, his physical body is equivalent to a pile of trash. It's better to just destroy it. He knew very well that once a half-step primordial soul stage powerhouse like Patriarch Sanju's physical body was destroyed, the consequences would be extremely severe. Even if Patriarch Sanju went into seclusion to recuperate for a few hundred years, he could still reform his physical body and recover to his peak strength. However, his martial arts foundation was damaged, and it was very likely that he would not be able to reach the primordial soul stage. There was no hope for him in this lifetime. At this moment, Patriarch Sanju's physical body gradually collapsed. With a whoosh, it split open and turned into a large cloud of black dust that scattered from the sky. His physical body was completely gone. Only a ball of white spirit light was left, floating in the air in a daze. After a momentary daze, he flew toward the Golden Dragon Emperor and yelled in a panicked voice, "Your Majesty, save me! Save me!" The spirit voice transmission spread out and reverberated on the surface of the sea. His voice was filled with fear and despair. Ji Tianxing, however, waved his hand and executed a secret capturing technique. With a giant golden palm, he grabbed old ancestor Sanju's soul. The Golden Dragon Emperor's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly yelled, "Ji Tianxing, don't act rashly." As he spoke, he teleported before Ji Tianxing and stared at him with a dignified gaze. He growled, "I promised before that I would save ancestor Sanju's life when he was in danger. This emperor is a man of his word. I will never go back on my word." Ji Tianxing nodded and revealed a playful smile as he said, "Your Majesty, how could I possibly allow you to be a person who betrays your trust? Don't worry, I won't kill old ancestor 3 Absolutes. He won't die today either." Only then was the Golden Dragon Emperor reassured, and he nodded. "In that case you can release him." Ji Tianxing shook his head, and his smile became even more playful. I only promised not to kill him, and I also guaranteed that he wouldn't die. I never said I would let him go. You. The Golden Dragon Emperor immediately frowned, and a bad premonition arose in his heart. What do you want to do? Ji Tianqing smiled but didn't answer. Instead, he executed a secret technique, and a dark purple lightning surged out of his right palm and drilled into Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's soul. Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's injuries were too severe, and his strength was weak. Being corroded by the purple lightning, he couldn't resist at all. He even let out a shrill cry. Following a series of crackling sounds, Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's soul was wrapped in lightning, and it became half white and half purple. It was very strange. His soul struggled violently for a long time before it gradually calmed down and stopped moving. The Golden Dragon Emperor was worried that Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes had been killed by the lightning, so he hurriedly checked the aura of his soul. Only then did he discover that he had only fainted. Ji Tianqing, what are you doing? He frowned at Ji Tianqing and asked in confusion. Ji Tianqing held Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's soul in his palm and explained with a smile. Just now, I used a long-lost ancient secret technique called the Wind Thunder Soul Devouring Technique. I implanted a bolt of Ninth Heaven Divine Lightning into Old Ancestor 3 Absolute's soul. From now on, his life and death are under my control. No matter where he escapes, as long as I willed it, that bolt of Ninth Heaven Divine Lightning will destroy his soul, and he will die completely. If he doesn't want to die, he can only listen to my orders obediently and become my servant. The Golden Dragon Emperor's pupils constricted, and a complicated expression appeared on his face. He sighed and said, although this method doesn't take his life, it's more ruthless than killing him. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a calm expression, that's right. The way to take revenge doesn't necessarily have to be to kill people. Wouldn't it be more satisfying to turn your enemy into a servant or dog that you can order around as you wish? The Golden Dragon Emperor looked at him deeply and said in a low voice, you're so young, but your methods are so ruthless. In the future, you'll definitely achieve great things. However, why have I never heard of this ancient secret technique that you speak of? Ji Tianqing smiled and explained. This secret technique was a secret technique that very few people knew in the ancient times. It was very mysterious, and very few people knew it. However, you must have heard of another divine technique derived from the secret technique, and that is the Soul Demonic Seed Technique. The Golden Dragon Emperor's expression changed as he hurriedly nodded and said, of course I've heard of this evil secret technique. It's said that in the ancient times, many evil cultivators used this technique to plant demonic roots in the souls of powerful cultivators of various races. In the end, they completely turned into demons and became evil spirits, bringing disaster to the world. However, in the later stages of the ancient times, this secret technique was too evil and vicious. Countless powerful cultivators spurned it and encircled it. In the end, it was gradually lost. Ji Tianqing nodded and added, you're right, that's indeed the case. However, the Wind Thunder Soul Devouring Technique was originally a secret technique of the righteous sections. After it was learned by the evil cultivators, it was used and modified to become the Soul Demonic Seed Technique. In short, many cultivation techniques originally belonged to the righteous sects, but when they fell into the hands of evil cultivators, they were used to poison living beings and became evil cultivation techniques. The Golden Dragon Emperor gently clapped his hands and a trace of admiration appeared in his eyes. He nodded and said, that's right. Although you're young, you have such an understanding. You're indeed extraordinary. Today's matter is a personal grudge between you and Ancestor Sanju. As long as you don't kill him today, I won't go back on my word. As for how you deal with him, that's your own business. I won't ask about it, and I'll have a clear conscience. Ji Tianqing put away Ancestor Sanju's soul and cupped his hands to the Golden Dragon Emperor. Many thanks for your Majesty's help. Since that's the case, this junior will take his leave. The Golden Dragon Emperor smiled and nodded. Now that the demon race is wreaking havoc in the human world, the world is in chaos. I'm sure you have an important task to attend to, so I won't invite you to the Dragon Palace as a guest. However, I'll remember the kindness you've shown my clan and will definitely return the favor in the future. Chapter 1322. Ji Tianqing rode on the little black dragon, flying high in the sky as fast as lightning. In just 10 short days, he left Ruin's End. He crossed the vast East China Sea and hurried back to the Central Plain. Along the way, He sat on the back of the black dragon as he silently thought about some things. It had already been over half a year since he and Yun Yao left the central plain in search of the Neptunian god orb. In that half a year, he and Yun Yao had faced countless dangers. They had almost lost their lives many times. However, they had made it through and even profited from the disaster. They had obtained many treasures, and their strength had increased drastically. Now, Yun Yao was still in seclusion in the world within the sword. She was busy refining the Neptunian god orb. After all, she was refining the orb by herself. Her experience was still rather shallow, so it would take her a very long time. However, Ji Tianqing believed that her strength would definitely skyrocket once she refined the orb. Qianyu was also in the world within the sword. She had always been cultivating in seclusion. Ever since she underwent the heavenly tribulation and reached soul refinement, the innate talent and potential of the heavenly fox bloodline had been completely unleashed. The progress of its strength could be said to be changing with each passing day, rising with the tide, so fast that it made people speechless. Yun Yao, the little black dragon, and Qianyu were all rapidly becoming stronger. To Ji Tianqing, this was something worth rejoicing over. He also felt happy for them. However, he remained calm along the way. His heart was filled with worry. He very much wanted to know how the situation of the continent had been in the half a year he had been away. What new developments and news had there been in the war between the three races and the demon army? Had the evil and powerful blood god massacred hundreds of millions of people of various races? Ji Tianqing was worried about the situation of the continent, so he got the little black dragon to hurry back as quickly as possible. A month later, the little black dragon crossed half of the East China Sea and returned to the profound sky continent. When he passed by the cities along the coast, Ji Tianqing paid special attention to the situation of the cities. He looked down from the sky and saw that the cities along the coast had recovered their peace. Most of the reconstruction had been completed as well. Without the blood god and the demon army causing trouble, the commoners had already recovered their peace. They had rebuilt their homes and lived prosperous lives. When he saw this scene, Ji Tianqing felt much more at ease. He didn't stop and continued to rush back to the central continent. He did not forget that when he was ambushed by Murong Zhang, the imperial tutor had personally come to stop him. Afterwards, the imperial tutor solemnly reminded him that he had to make a trip to the imperial court after returning to Zhongzhou. The emperor summoned him and wanted to discuss matters with him face to face. Ji Tianqing had always kept this matter at the bottom of his heart, silently guessing the emperor's intentions. Why did he summon him alone? What was it that the celestial emperor had to talk to him face to face? He remembered clearly that the last time he had seen the emperor was when he had been conferred the title of Heavenly Stellar Region Lord. Other than this kind of major event, he usually did not interact with the emperor. For the emperor to have the imperial tutor deliver a message personally, this matter is definitely not a small one. It's definitely an important one. But there aren't many things between the emperor and I. Perhaps it has something to do with the son of heaven Long Yun Shao Kenshin, or the demon race? Could it be that the emperor has summoned me back to the imperial court to have me lead an army to the northern border to resist the invasion of the demon race? Ji Tianqing secretly speculated for a long time. He felt that all of these guesses were possible, but he could not be sure what this matter was. 1 month later, Ji Tianqing returned to the central continent. On this evening, the setting sun illuminated half the sky with its golden afterglow. Ji Tianqing rode the black dragon to the heavenly mountain range where the imperial court was located. The most majestic peak in the mountain range was Heaven Connecting Peak. Half of it was obscured by the setting sun while the other half was obscured by white clouds. The palaces and buildings on the summit were faintly discernible in the clouds, and they were even covered in a layer of divine golden light. Ji Tianqing returned the black dragon to the sword world and landed alone halfway up the mountain. After more than 2 years, he had once more come to the imperial court of the human race. Even though he was now very strong and his horizons were much broader than before, he still maintained a reverence for the majestic aura of the imperial court. He showed the region lord's golden seal to the guards before being allowed to enter the imperial court. Then, he followed the wide and straight divine path all the way to the summit. Not long after, he arrived at the summit and explained his purpose to the guards guarding the imperial court. The guard commander did not dare to delay. He hurriedly led him across the square and into the palace of heaven and earth. The sacred and dignified palace of heaven and earth was full of hidden sentries. The defense was very tight. The guard commander led Ji Tianqing to the imperial emperor's imperial study. He bowed and took his leave. Ji Tianqing tidied up his appearance before reporting in a loud voice. Regent Lord Ji Tianqing of Tianqin has an audience with His Majesty the Imperial Emperor. In the spacious, bright, exquisite, and elegant study. A wisp of sunset passed through the window and shone on the jade floor, bringing a trace of warmth to the solemn and dignified study. There were several thick piles of memorials and official documents on the large purple jade table with dragon patterns. A simple and mysterious bronze incense burner was emitting green smoke in spirals. It emitted the fragrance of purple wood and jade sandalwood, making one's soul feel refreshed. The Imperial Emperor, who was wearing a golden dragon robe and a purple gold dragon jade crown, was sitting in front of the purple jade table. He was holding a memorial in his hand and frowning in deep thought. His body was tall and his appearance was dignified. Between his brows, there was a righteous aura that could accommodate heaven and earth. Suddenly, he heard a voice outside the study. His thoughts were immediately interrupted and he put down the memorial in his hand. Ji Tianqing? Why did this brat take so long to come back? The Imperial Emperor muttered in a low voice. He frowned slightly and seemed to be a little dissatisfied. But his brows quickly relaxed and his expression returned to normal. He said in a low and dignified voice, "Come in." Ji Tianqing, who was waiting outside, heard the Imperial Emperor's voice and pushed the door open to enter. He walked to the middle of the study and stood still. He bowed solemnly and paid his respects to the Imperial Emperor. Subordinate Ji Tianqing pays his respects to the Imperial Emperor. The Imperial Emperor did not answer immediately. He looked at him calmly and sized him up with a deep gaze. In just a moment, the Imperial Emperor saw the changes in him. He was completely different from 2 years ago. Not only was his aura stronger, but he also had the confidence and dominance of an expert. There was also a vast and mysterious aura. Moreover, the Imperial Emperor could clearly see that his strength had reached the 7th level of the spirit refinement realm. His dermic powers and divine spirit aura were comparable to a half-step essence soul realm cultivator. The Imperial Emperor was used to seeing great storms in his life. His temperament was like a deep well, calm and unperturbed. But now that he saw such a huge change in Ji Tianqing, his eyes widened. His eyes shone brightly and his face was filled with surprise. "You brat! No wonder you delayed for so long before coming back to the Imperial Court to meet me. Tell me honestly, did you have a fortuitous encounter? If not, how could your strength improve by leaps and bounds and reach such a terrifying level?" At this moment, not only was the Imperial Emperor shocked, but his tone was also not as dignified as before. Chapter 13:23. When Ji Tianqing saw the Emperor's reaction, he wanted to laugh in his heart and felt a trace of pride. The Emperor, who has always been aloof and incomparably dignified, would actually lose his composure like this. However, he knew that he couldn't hide his changes from the Emperor, so he answered truthfully, "Your Majesty, to be honest, you are right." When the Emperor saw his respectful attitude without a trace of resentment, he revealed a satisfied smile. Since that's the case, then this Emperor won't pursue your crime of being late for a few months. You may rise." Ji Tianqing then stood up and looked at the Emperor with a calm expression. He asked in a solemn tone, "May I ask what orders does the Emperor have for this subordinate to be summoned back?" The Emperor muttered to himself for a while before recovering his dignified face. He asked in a deep voice, "Ji Tianqing, let's not talk about this matter for now. This Emperor has something to ask you. You must answer truthfully. Please enlighten me, Emperor." Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and bowed. He listened with a calm expression. The monarch stroked his beard and asked in a low voice, "You have a deep grudge with the Murong family. Murong Zhang tried to kill you on the way and you were about to kill him to avenge yourself. However, this Emperor sent the Imperial tutor to stop you and prevent you from taking revenge. Have you ever resented this Emperor in your heart?" Ji Tianqing was startled. He never thought that the Emperor would ask him this question. Could it be that the Emperor sensed my dissatisfaction and was afraid that I would be disloyal, so he tested me in person? This thought flashed through his mind and he immediately became alert. He quickly answered, "Your Majesty, you are the Emperor of my clan, the leader of millions of people. This subordinate is your subject. Of course, I have to follow your orders. How could I dare to complain?" However, the Emperor didn't listen to his dignified words. He stared at him with a sharp gaze and asked, "You don't dare or you don't?" After saying that, he added another sentence. Think carefully before you answer. This emperor wants to hear the truth. If you have half a lie, you won't be able to hide it from this emperor. Ji Tianqing was even more confused. He did not know what the emperor's intentions were. However, he could sense that the monarch's soul energy was enveloping him, as if he could see through his heart. He knew that he couldn't hide it from the emperor, so he didn't try to explain himself and answered truthfully. Reporting to the emperor, this subordinate did have some complaints at first and was very unwilling. However, after the imperial tutor explained to this subordinate understood your difficulties and intentions. Naturally, the resentment in my heart dissipated. Even when this subordinate caused a huge disturbance in the central state, you didn't pursue the matter. Even if it caused the people to criticize me, you still wanted to protect this subordinate. After careful consideration, I understand that you naturally have your reasons and arrangements for doing so. The imperial emperor had been silent all this time. He stared at him, observing the changes in his expression and the fluctuations of his divine soul. After he finished speaking, the emperor concluded that he was not lying. Only then did his expression soften. That's right. Tianqing, it's naturally for the best that you can understand this emperor's intentions. Now, there's only you and this emperor in this study. Since you can tell this emperor the truth, it proves that this emperor can still trust you and can still entrust you with important tasks. When Ji Tianqing heard this, he knew that the emperor was just throwing a brick to attract jade. The main topic was about to come. He cupped his hands and took the initiative to say, as the Tianqin region lord, this subordinate should serve the people. If the emperor has any important tasks, please tell me. This subordinate will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation. The emperor glanced at him and said with a playful tone, don't be so full of yourself. If this emperor gives you an important task now and asks you to go to the northern border alone to kill thousands of demons and protect the peace of our people, would you still dare to agree? Ji Tianqing slowly raised his head and looked directly at the emperor. His gaze was firm and unyielding. His voice was sonorous as he said a word. I dare. The emperor was stunned for a moment. Then he raised his eyebrows and revealed a playful smile. You brat, I'm afraid you've had an amazing adventure. You're so confident and ambitious. Ji Tianqing shook his head and said in a serious tone, Your Highness, this has nothing to do with the adventure I've had. Even without your order, I will go to the battlefield and kill the demons. I'm not a saint, nor am I the ruler of a clan. I don't dare to dream of saving hundreds of millions of people. But this subordinate has a blood feud with the demons. I will never let them go. The emperor looked at him deeply and nodded solemnly, saying, Good. Very good. Tianqing, I'm very pleased that you're so determined. However, the important task I'm going to give you today is not for you to go to the battlefield to kill the demons. You're the #1 genius of our clan, the most powerful person in the past 1,000 years. It's a waste to let you go to the battlefield to fight. Ji Tianqing's expression changed. He frowned slightly and asked, May I ask what you want me to do, Emperor? Go to a place and get an item. The emperor showed a serious and solemn expression and said in a vigorous tone, A clan protection divine weapon. Get a clan protection divine weapon? Ji Tianqing was even more confused. He said in disbelief, What clan protection divine weapon? How do I get it? The emperor raised his hand and signaled him not to be anxious. He said in a neither fast nor slow tone, Regarding this matter, I'll first tell you a story from the past. 10,000 years ago, in the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range in the south, there was an earth-shattering volcanic eruption. Endless fire covered tens of thousands of miles and dyed half the sky red. The tens of thousands of mountains in the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range turned into a sea of fire and scorched earth. Hundreds of thousands of people died because of this. Our clan's imperial court sent elite experts to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range to investigate the situation. After half a year, they finally found the shocking secret hidden in the depths of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. But after those experts entered the depths of the ground, none of them survived. They all died. This matter shocked the imperial court. The current emperor brought the empress and personally went to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range to investigate the reason. In the end, the emperor brought back a top primordial soul-level Dharma treasure from the depths of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. This item came from the ancient times and was refined by an ancient almighty. It has the power to burn the world. It's called the Celestial God Fire Cauldron. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing vaguely understood the emperor's meaning. He was instantly filled with curiosity and anticipation for the celestial god fire cauldron. He didn't interrupt the emperor and continued to listen carefully. This cauldron can be called a peerless divine weapon. It's hidden in the depths of the Vermilion Bird Mountain range. Because of its age, the power imbalance caused the volcano to erupt. In order to obtain that divine weapon, the empress was severely injured. After returning to the imperial court, she died in less than 100 years. The emperor spent decades of effort and used up all the imperial court's wealth to repair the celestial god fire cauldron and take it for his own use. However, the celestial god fire cauldron is too powerful and can't be stored in the imperial court for a long time. It must be nurtured in the dragon vein of the Vermilion Bird Mountain range. Chapter 1324. After listening to the emperor's story, Ji Tianqing already understood the emperor's intentions. Emperor, you mean you want me to go to the Vermilion Bird Mountain range to retrieve the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron? The emperor nodded slightly and said solemnly, that's right. Ji Tianqing frowned and asked, Emperor, I have a question. The Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron has been stored in the Vermilion Bird Mountain range since 10,000 years ago. Now that 10,000 years have passed, the thousands of experts guarding that divine artifact must have died long ago, right? The emperor nodded again and explained, of course. However, I have not finished my story, so you have to listen patiently. Please continue, Emperor. Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment before he quickly cupped his hands and continued to listen. The emperor continued, those thousands of experts have been guarding the Vermilion Bird Mountain range to protect the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron. However, after the news was leaked, all the experts in the world knew about it, especially the experts of the demon race. They schemed to snatch the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron. After all, the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron was an ancient divine artifact with extremely strong and ferocious power. It was the nemesis of the demon race. Countless experts fought against the invaders in order to protect the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron and eventually died. The imperial court constantly sent out reinforcements, and generations of imperial court generals rushed to the Vermilion Bird Mountain range. Until 1,000 years ago, when the demon race invaded, the ancient demon emperor sneaked into middle ground and massacred my people. I ordered the generals guarding the Vermilion Bird Mountain range to retrieve the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron and escort it to the imperial court. I wanted to borrow the power of the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron to deal with the ancient demon emperor and get rid of the demon venomous insects. However, hundreds of generals and experts were intercepted by several demon marshals while escorting the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron, and almost all of them died. Fortunately, I arrived in time to protect the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron and used the power of the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron to kill several demon marshals and suppress the demon venomous insects. I'm sure you know what happened after that. I asked Kenshin for help. Kenshin chased after the ancient demon emperor and sealed him in Tianquan region. Hearing this emperor's words, the Dipper God Fire Cauldron of the emperor had Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron the emperor. And he continued to listen to the emperor's Dipper God Cauldron. The generals guards to the Big Dipper all the Dipper Mountain ranges Dipper the Big God Cauldron. On Big S Dipper God Dipper God. All of the guards have been sacrificed, so I sent a few of my trusted subordinates to be stationed in the Vermilion Bird Mountain range. In order to deceive the public, and in consideration of the long term, I ordered them to create a sect that will forever guard Sunless Peak and protect the heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron for generations. Now, 1,000 years had passed. That sect was living in seclusion, and it was secretly reproducing and developing. It had already become a powerful force under the imperial court. The sect master has changed twice, but the secret of the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron is no longer known to the world, becoming an unsolved mystery. Ji Tianqing was surprised when he heard this. He nodded and praised, Emperor, you are indeed meticulous. You plan ahead. This method is really unexpected. If a large number of generals are stationed at the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron, everyone in the world knows that it is where the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron is. But if it is a hidden sect, it can deceive people and successfully protect the secret of the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron. The emperor revealed a gratified smile and nodded. That's right. The Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron is the imperial court's clan guarding divine artifact. It can suppress the demon race and protect our people. How can it be lost? I have already inherited the imperial court's clan guarding divine artifact, the human sovereign sword. I can no longer sacrifice my divine soul to the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron and refine it into a life-guarding divine artifact. I have long planned to bestow the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron to Yun Shao after he reaches the Soul Refinement Realm and let him control this divine artifact. It's just that at present, the Fiend race army is sweeping the world once more, wantonly attacking the various races. Troubled times have already arrived. The situation is urgent. Time waits for no one. This emperor must take out the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron as soon as possible and entrust it to a suitable person. Only then can it unleash a greater effect. Therefore, this emperor deliberated for a long time and finally decided to entrust this clan-guarding divine artifact to you. Let you wield the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron and resist the Fiend race's invasion. But, you have to personally head to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range's Sunless Peak and personally take out the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron. Only then can you obtain the Divine Cauldron's recognition. Ji Tianqing finally understood everything and knew the whole story. I didn't expect that I unintentionally snatched the divine artifact that should have belonged to Long Yunshao again. If this guy knew, he wouldn't bear a grudge against me, right? This thought flashed across in his mind, and he could not resist somewhat wanting to laugh. But this matter was the emperor's decision. He naturally had to abide by the decree. Even if Long Yunshao had any complaints, he could only blame it on the emperor and not on him. Collecting his thoughts, he bowed with a solemn expression and cupped his hands to the emperor. Thank you, Emperor, for bestowing me with the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron. If I wield the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron, I will definitely protect my people and territory with my life and fight the Fiend race to the end. The emperor nodded with satisfaction and said in a deep voice, Here is a map of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. Take it and follow the map to find Sunless Peak. In addition, this emperor has already written a decree. Take it with you. When you reach the divine hidden sect, pass this decree to the sect master. She will naturally know what to do. With that, the emperor waved his big sleeve and shot out a ball of gentle golden light that flew in front of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing reached out to take a look and saw that there were two scrolls in the golden light. The white scroll was the map, and the golden scroll was the emperor's decree. Tianqing, time is of the essence. Leave for the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range as soon as possible and retrieve the Big Dipper God Fire Cauldron as soon as possible. This emperor will be waiting for your good news in the imperial court. I hope everything goes well for you. Ji Tianqing did not say anything more and quickly put away the map and the decree. He cupped his hands and bowed. Tianqing obeys the emperor's order. After bowing, he turned around and left the imperial study. After he left, the emperor pondered for a long time in silence before he continued to review official documents and deal with important military matters. After Ji Tianqing left the Palace of Heaven and Earth, he passed through the square in front of the palace and walked down the mountain. Before coming to the imperial court, he planned to go back to Zhongzhou City to check on the situation of the imperial residence and Cloud Spirit Palace. But the emperor ordered him to hurry to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range as soon as possible, so he could only give up on this idea. Swoosh! After leaving the imperial court, he rode the black dragon into the sky and rushed to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range as fast as lightning. On the way, he calmed down and carefully recalled the emperor's words. Vermilion Bird Mountain Range, Sunless Peak, Hidden God Sect. Why do I have a sense of déjà vu when I heard these names before? He muttered the three words Divine Hidden Sect, and frowned for a long time before he finally remembered. Chapter 1325. Shi Zhongjian was the simple and honest golden-haired youth who called himself the Prince of the Golden Lion race. When Ji Tianqing first entered the southern desolate swamp, he traveled with Shi Zhongjian to find the broken divine sword. They explored the Sin Dragon Pond and encountered an azure dragon. They even went through the rainbow forest and were ambushed by the spiritual insects race. In the end, they met the earth spirit race in Carefree Mountain and found the broken sword, the burial of heaven. The second time Ji Tianqing saw Shi Zhongjian was on the way to the Shao clan. At that time, Shi Zhongjian and his followers were attacked by two soul realm demon beasts. They were seriously injured and almost lost their lives. Ji Tianqing saved Shi Zhongjian's life and found that Shi Zhongjian had obtained the azure dragon from the Sin Dragon Pond. Now, he was going to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range to retrieve the heavenly handle God Fire Cauldron. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that the sect that had guarded the divine cauldron for generations on Sunless Peak was actually the Hidden God sect. This is too much of a coincidence. If this Hidden God sect is Shi Zhongjian's Hidden God sect, then I will definitely be able to see him again. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself. Shi Zhongjian's simple and honest appearance appeared in his mind and he couldn't help but smile. The Vermilion Bird Mountain Range was located in the southwest of Central State, between the human and demon territories. Even with the little black dragon's flying speed, it would take about 10 days to travel from the Imperial Court to the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range. The Vermilion Bird Mountain Range was very vast and desolate. No one could be seen for many years. Without a map, ordinary martial practitioners couldn't enter the depths of the mountain range. Moreover, the terrain of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range was very steep and there were many powerful demons and beasts. The environment was very dangerous. An expert like Ji Tianqing wouldn't be able to find Sunless Peak if he rashly entered the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range and wasn't familiar with the terrain. Moreover, he would encounter all kinds of trouble and danger. Therefore, he took out the map of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range given to him by the Emperor and carefully observed it for a long time. He memorized the entire map and engraved it in his mind before putting it away. Then, he placed the broken sword on the black dragon's back and entered the sword world. Yun Yao, Qian Yu, and the Jinshan King were all in seclusion in peaceful Soil City, constantly increasing their strength. However, Ji Tianqing did not enter the sword world to visit them. He flew above the city, crossing thousands of li of mountains and rivers. He arrived at the depths of the vast mountain range and stopped above a valley. This was a deep valley, with a radius of 200 miles. The valley was filled with all kinds of strange flowers and plants, and a dense forest. In the middle of the valley stood an ancient, dark green tree that was thousands of feet tall, like a giant peak. This ancient tree was incomparably huge. It was at least 300 feet thick. At first glance, one could tell that it was a spirit tree that had lived for thousands of years. Hundreds of thousands of branches extended from the treetop that was thousands of feet tall, and it was covered with green and translucent leaves. The vast canopy of the trees covered the entire valley within a radius of 200 miles. This astonishingly huge ancient tree was actually the family treasure of the Duanmu family. It was a high-grade soul-level magic treasure, the Azure Light Treasure Tree. Ever since Ji Tianqing killed Duanmu Huang and obtained the Azure Light Treasure Tree, he rarely used this magic treasure. He only used it for healing. As his strength increased, the chances of him using the Azure Light Treasure Tree became fewer and fewer. But now, the Azure Light Treasure Tree had a new use and effect. Because it had become Forefather Sanju's main body. More than a month ago, Ji Tianqing used the Wind Thunder Soul Devouring technique to control Forefather Sanju's soul, turning him into a slave. Unfortunately, Forefather Sanju's physical body had been destroyed, and only his soul was left. He could not unleash much power. If Forefather Sanju went into seclusion to recuperate and reform his physical body, it would take at least a few hundred years. This was obviously not realistic. Therefore, Ji Tianqing had a sudden idea to merge Forefather Sanju's soul with the Azure Light Treasure Tree. This way, Forefather Sanju would be able to possess his main body and recover his strength in a short period of time. Moreover, he would be able to unleash the power of the Azure Light Treasure Tree and possess powerful healing and recovery abilities. Once this method succeeded, Ji Tianqing would have a powerful slave with powerful healing abilities. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky above the valley and stared at the Azure Light Treasure Tree for a while before seeing the result. After more than a month of seclusion, Forefather Sanju had successfully merged with the Azure Light Treasure Tree. Now the Azure Light Treasure Tree was Forefather Sanju, and Forefather Sanju was the Treasure Tree. The two had merged into one, complementing each other and becoming stronger. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing revealed a gratified expression and asked, "Forefather Sanju, how is your cultivation going?" Forefather Sanju was cultivating, trying his best to increase his strength. Suddenly hearing Ji Tianqing's voice, the entire treasure tree trembled, and the thousands of branches rustled. Then, Forefather Sanju's voice came from the treasure tree, and his tone was filled with respect and fear as he said, "Master, I have successfully merged with the treasure tree and recovered 80% of my strength. This old servant kneels and thanks Master for not killing me. Thank you, Master, for bestowing this old servant with the green light treasure tree as my body, allowing this old servant to benefit from this disaster and obtain a new life." Ji Tianqing was very satisfied with Forefather Sanju's reaction, and asked despite knowing the answer, "You were originally a half-step immortal soul stage expert, able to call yourself an ancestor overseas and live a carefree life. Now that you have become my slave, not only do you not have any complaints, you even want to thank me? Why is that?" The treasured tree gently swayed its branches, bowed down and made a respectful gesture, and answered, "Master, this old servant had eyes but failed to see. I dared to provoke you, so I deserve to die." Master only needs a single thought to completely destroy this old servant. However, Master is benevolent and spared my life. This is a great favor. I'm still alive now, and with the azure light treasure tree as my body, I have a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. This is something I didn't dare to imagine in the past. Furthermore, Master, you are the #1 genius in the world. In the future, you will definitely be able to transcend the cage and enter the martial Tao's divine realm. I can follow you and serve you. In the future, I will have the chance to see a wider world. This is my lifelong dream. It is precisely because of this that I am grateful to you. The corners of Ji Tianqing's mouth curled up as he said in a playful tone, Forefather Sanju, there's no need to pretend with me. I won't fall for it. To tell you the truth, no matter how much you hate me, it's useless. Don't think that you can make me lower my guard by pretending to be loyal and obedient. You will have a chance to escape in the future. That's impossible. Don't even think about it. As long as my soul isn't destroyed, I can detonate the divine lightning with a thought and destroy your soul. Don't dream of dispelling that divine lightning unless you can reach the 9th tribulation realm. However, with me around, as long as I'm unwilling, you will never be able to reach that realm. Therefore, if you are smart enough, stay by my side obediently and be a loyal lackey. Chapter 13:26. Ji Tianqing's words caused the azure light treasured tree to tremble. Clearly, these words were like daggers that stabbed deeply into Forefather 3-Severing's soul, causing his thoughts to churn. He fell silent for a long time before he gradually calmed down. Swish! Azure light surged out of the azure light treasured tree, quickly condensing into a figure that flew before Ji Tianqing. The figure condensed from green light was an old man in green robes. He looked exactly like Forefather Sanju. Although he was tall and burly, his aura was extremely gentle and reserved, just like an old butler. He bowed respectfully, then said to Ji Tianqing, Master, thank you for telling me the truth, and dispelling those unrealistic fantasies of mine. Don't worry, Master. I understand your intentions. I won't dare to be disloyal in the future and will be absolutely loyal to you. Ji Tianqing glanced at him. Seeing the calmness after despair in his eyes, he nodded in satisfaction. It's good that you understand. In the past, you were Forefather 3-Severing of the Heaven Evasion sect. Although you were domineering, you were shackled at the soul refinement realm and would never be able to reach the soul refinement realm. Now, you fused with the azure light treasured tree and become my servant. To you, this is not only an unforeseen event, but also a fortuitous opportunity and fortune. Forefather 3-Severing nodded and said emotionally, Everything that has happened in the past few months has been like a dream to me. I'll just treat it as a rebirth. From today onwards, I'm no longer Forefather 3-Severing. I'm just an old servant by your side. Don't call me Forefather 3-Severing. Just call me Asan. Asan? Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow and looked at him strangely. Forefather 3-Severing nodded calmly and explained, I've been an orphan since I was young. I was adopted by my master and brought to the Heaven Evasion sect to cultivate. After I became famous, I called myself Swordsman 3-Severing. 1,000 years later, I became Forefather 3-Severing. Ji Tianqing waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need to say anything more. Okay, then I'll call you Asan from now on. You can recuperate here. I'll call you when I need you. With that, he turned around and left. Farewell, Master. Forefather 3 Absolute stood in the air above the valley and bowed respectfully, sending him off with his eyes. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. That evening, Ji Tianqing entered the depths of the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range and arrived at Sunless Peak. Looking down from high up in the sky, one could only see steep and lofty mountain ranges all around them. There was no end to them. A few enormous and majestic mountain ranges lay quietly on the ground like enormous dark brown dragons, bathing in the light of the setting sun. In the mountain range, there were many towering peaks that were thousands of feet tall, emitting an ancient aura. Ji Tianqing didn't know how long this mountain range had existed. However, judging from the degree of weathering of the rocks in the mountain range, at least tens of thousands of years had passed. The strange thing was that the temperature in the Vermilion Bird Mountain Range was very high. The closer one got to the depths of the mountain range, the hotter the air became. Especially near Sunless Peak, the air fluctuated invisibly, emitting a terrifyingly high temperature. Cultivators below the Sky Origin realm couldn't stay in this area at all. If they stayed any longer, they would be roasted into charcoal. Of course, the mountain range in all directions was barren, and not a drop of water could be seen. All the mountain ranges and the ground were charred black. There were even dark red lava flowing in some low-lying valleys. There were also many mountain peaks that were emitting black smoke, and one could vaguely see flames flickering. Before Ji Tianqing came, the emperor had briefly introduced that there was a huge volcano hidden in the center of the Vermilion Bird Mountain range. Under Sunless Peak, there was a vast sea of lava hidden deep underground. Ji Tianqing didn't know why this mountain range was called the Vermilion Bird Mountain range. However, he knew that this was a world of fire, and the surrounding mountains were all called Flaming Mountains. Among the many mountain peaks, there was one that was the most majestic and tall. It was the Sunless Peak in front of him. It was 2,000 feet tall, covered an area of 400 miles, and was indomitable. There were no buildings at the foot of the mountain, and it didn't have a plaza like ordinary sections. It was surrounded by deep valleys and mountain streams, and there was only a mountain gate at the waist of the mountain. The mountain gate wasn't big, only 10 feet tall and 10 feet wide. It looked small and low-key. However, there was a stone tablet beside the mountain gate that was engraved with the words, "Hidden God's Sect" in dark gold. The writing was like dragons and snakes, and it was majestic. Behind the mountain gate, there was a 5-step wide black stone staircase that zigzagged and extended to the peak of the mountain. On the peak of the mountain, there was a flat land with a radius of a few dozen miles. There were a dozen palaces and courtyards, and they were all very simple and unadorned. Looking from afar, those palaces and courtyards didn't look splendid and dazzling, and they didn't have a sacred and honorable aura. In general, the Hidden God sect looked very low-key, simple, and weathered, just like an ordinary second-rate sect, and not like a grand and magnificent top sect. Ji Tianqing looked at Sunless Peak from top to bottom and saw some clues. He revealed a playful smile. The Hidden God sect hid so deeply and kept such a low profile. It is indeed a wise move. Even if the experts of the various races are looking for the Divine Cauldron, they wouldn't care about the Hidden God sect, and they wouldn't associate the Divine Cauldron with this ordinary sect. He secretly admired the people of the Hidden God sect for their wisdom and forbearance. Swish! He put the little black dragon into the sword world and descended from the sky, landing outside the mountain gate at the waist of the mountain. Then, a green light flashed beside him, and an old man wearing a green robe appeared. It was Old Ancestor Sanju. Old Ancestor Sanju obediently followed behind him and walked towards the mountain gate of the Hidden God sect. It was empty outside the mountain gate, and there was even a layer of dust on the ground. When Ji Tianqing walked to the foot of the mountain gate, a sloppy old man wearing a gray robe and carrying a wine gourd walked out of a stone house at the side. This old man's body was stooped, and his long hair was messy and tangled. His gray robe was also greasy and tattered. He carried a green-skinned gourd in his hand, and his whole body reeked of alcohol. His nose was also red, and he looked exactly like an old drunkard. "Hey, kid, stop right there." The old drunkard carried the wine gourd, and his figure flashed in front of Ji Tianqing, blocking his way. His footsteps were a little staggered, and his body swayed as he walked a few steps. He sized up Ji Tianqing with his eyes, and then shouted, "Kid, what are you doing? Why are you trespassing on Sunless Peak?" Without waiting for Ji Tianqing to speak, Old Ancestor Sanju took 2 steps forward and shouted with a dignified voice, "Impudent! You sloppy old drunkard! How dare you be disrespectful to my master? My master is the Honorable Heavenly Stellar Region Lord, and he came to the Hidden God sect on the orders of the human race's emperor to discuss important matters. Why aren't you moving out of the way? If you delay the important matters, how can you bear the responsibility?" Old Ancestor Sanju's voice was stern, and as he spoke, he released an invisible divine soul aura that suppressed the old drunkard. If it was an ordinary person, they would have been scared out of their wits and knelt down to greet him. But that old drunkard only quivered, and immediately sobered up, his eyes becoming deep and bright. Chapter 13:27. Ji Tianqing found it strange just now. Why would the Hidden God sect make such an arrangement? Even if they didn't send a large number of experts to guard the sect, they shouldn't have let a sloppy old drunkard guard the sect, right? Now, the old drunkard had blocked Old Ancestor Sanju's divine soul pressure without retreating half a step or showing the slightest fear. Only now did he understand that the old drunkard was a hidden expert. He secretly released his divine soul power and discovered that the old drunkard's strength had reached the 9th level of the soul refinement realm. Moreover, the old drunkard's cultivation was abnormally deep and was not inferior to the current old ancestor Sanju. No wonder the hidden god sect is so desolate with only one old drunkard guarding it. With him here, it's comparable to an army of thousands. As long as it's not a primordial soul supreme, it's impossible to barge in. This hidden god sect seems to be low-key and even a little declining, but they have such wisdom and courage. It's really unbelievable. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind, and he finally understood why the emperor trusted and valued the hidden god sect so much. At this time, the old drunkard raised his head and drank a mouthful of wine with his green calabash in hand. The strong smell of wine seeped out and actually contained a strong divine soul power, causing one's divine soul to be in a daze. His dark face flushed red as he glanced sideways at old ancestor Sanju and Ji Tianqing. He sneered, "Ha! It's a good thing that an esteemed guest has come, and our sect should treat you warmly. However, our sect is not receiving guests today, and from ancient times until now, we have never received rude guests. Please go back, don't spoil this old man's mood." The old drunkard's breath reeked of alcohol as he said these words drunkenly. As his voice fell, he casually drew a line with his left index and middle fingers, creating a deep ravine on the stone floor beneath his feet. This 1-meter-long ravine separated him from old ancestor Sanju. His meaning was clear. If Ji Tianqing and old ancestor Sanju dared to take half a step forward, he wouldn't be polite. Seeing this, old ancestor Sanju immediately frowned and shouted with a cold expression, "You old drunkard, you're really unreasonable. I must teach you a lesson." As he spoke, old ancestor Sanju raised his palm and was about to attack. "San." Ji Tianqing waved his hand, indicating for old ancestor Sanju to leave. Old ancestor 3 Absolute's body trembled. He hurriedly suppressed his anger and surging magic power, and obediently retreated to the side. Ji Tianqing took 2 steps forward and calmly looked at the old drunkard. He took out the mountain and river seal and said, "Senior, please forgive my servant for offending you earlier. I am Ji Tianqing, the leader of the Tianjin region. Today, I am here to visit your sect under the order of the emperor. I would like to discuss an important matter with your sect leader. Please pass on my message." He announced his identity and flashed his identity token. He expressed his intentions to the hidden god sect in a formal manner. In his mind, the old drunkard was a martial expert. He would know what was important and wouldn't dare to make things difficult for him. But he didn't expect that the old drunkard would glance at him and didn't even bother to look at the seal in his hand. He waved his hand and said, "Young man, who you are and who you're following has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with my sect. My sect is a small sect that lives in seclusion. We have always avoided the world and never participated in worldly disputes. We have nothing to do with the imperial courts of the various races. Please go back and don't stay here. Otherwise, I will have to chase you out." Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and stared into the old drunkard's eyes. He asked in a deep voice, "Senior, are you serious? You have to consider the consequences." The old drunkard glanced at him and drank a mouthful of wine. He sneered mockingly, "Are you threatening me? Ha ha! Young people nowadays are so arrogant and lawless." Finished speaking, he carried his wine gourd and staggered back into the sect. He returned to his stone house and lay down. This damned old drunkard. Old ancestor 3 Absolutes was so angry that his face turned ashen. He frowned and was about to chase after the old drunkard. Ji Tianqing waved his hand. Only then did he stop and retreat. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a puzzled expression and asked, "Master, is this old drunkard's brain muddled? Or is he pretending to be muddle-headed? Does he dare to disobey the orders of the imperial court?" Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. He shook his head and said, "When he said those words just now, I saw that his eyes were clear and his soul fluctuations were normal. He didn't seem to be lying. This means that this old drunkard probably doesn't know." Old ancestor 3 Absolutes was even more puzzled and asked back, "Even if the hidden god sect is deliberately hiding it, the old drunkard is a top expert. How could he not know about the relationship between the hidden god sect and the imperial court?" Ji Tianqing said calmly, "Not necessarily. This old drunkard is just a gatekeeper, not an elder or sect master of the hidden god sect. It's possible that he doesn't know." Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes thought for a moment and felt that it made sense. He couldn't help but ask, if a gatekeeper is so strong, how strong is the Hidden God sect? Could it be that they have a primordial spirit realm expert overseeing them? That's possible. Ji Tianxing nodded. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes thought for a moment and asked, Master, what do you plan to do? You don't know who the sect master of the Hidden God sect is, and you can't contact him. Are we going to be stopped by the old drunkard and have to wait here? Ji Tianxing shook his head and showed a playful smile, saying, There's no need for that. I have my ways. After saying this, he rummaged through his interspatial ring for a while and quickly found a communication jade slip. He inputted a message into the communication jade slip and released the jade slip. Whoosh! The jade slip turned into a stream of light and flew into the sky, immediately disappearing. Old Ancestor 3 Absolute saw this and asked doubtfully, Master, what are you? Ji Tianxing smiled and explained, A long time ago, I met an upright and brave young man who happened to be a disciple of the Hidden God sect. When I went to the Shao clan and saved his life on the way, he gave me 2 communication jade slips and told me to contact him in the future. It just so happened that they came in handy today. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes came to a realization and silently stood to the side, not saying anything more. The two waited for 100 breaths of time at the mountain gate before they saw a dazzling light of true essence on the mountain peak. In the next moment, a young man in white robes, riding a 1,000-meter-long, dark gray flood dragon, charged over at lightning speed. Whoosh! In a short 2 breaths of time, the gray flood dragon rushed to the mountain gate and stopped in front of Ji Tianxing and Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes. The violent wind brought by the flood dragon blew the sand and stones under the mountain gate, and dust filled the sky. The white-robed young man didn't care at all. His face was flushed with excitement as he hurriedly jumped off the dragon's back. Chapter 1328. This white-robed, tall and sturdy young man with a head full of golden hair was Xueqi. The flood dragon he was riding was the azure dragon he obtained from the evil dragon pool. Xueqi's face was flushed with excitement as he looked at Ji Tianxing with sparkling eyes, rubbing his hands excitedly. Ji Tianxing looked at him and saw that he had changed a lot. He couldn't help showing a gratified smile and nodded. Lion, I haven't seen you for half a year. You've changed a lot. Xueqi became even more excited after receiving his praise and nodded repeatedly. Big brother Tianxing, you flatter me. This is all thanks to Brother Dragon. It has helped me a lot in my cultivation. At the mention of the azure dragon, Xueqi was eloquent and eloquent. Ji Tianxing understood his temperament, so he patiently listened to him. After a while, Xueqi gradually calmed down and remembered to ask about proper business. Big brother Tianxing, our Hidden God sect is hidden deep in the Vermilion Bird Mountain range. Without a map, it would be difficult to find it. How did you find this place? Did you come here just to see me? Of course not. Ji Tianxing smiled and shook his head. Xueqi's eyes flashed with a touch of disappointment, but he immediately let it go and laughed at himself. Like I said, Big brother Tianxing is a peerless genius and a noble person. You have too many things to deal with on a daily basis. How could you have time to visit me? Big brother Tianxing, what business do you have at Sunless Peak? Ji Tianxing calmly explained. I came here on the Emperor's order to find the sect master of the Hidden God sect to discuss an important matter. What Emperor? Xueqi frowned and scratched his head, asking doubtfully. Why did the Emperor ask you to find our sect master? Ji Tianxing waved his hand and instructed. This matter is of great importance. It's not convenient to talk about it here. Let's go in first and I'll explain it to you later. Xueqi didn't doubt it and quickly nodded. Okay. Then let's go in first. Big brother Tianxing, this is your first time visiting our sect, so you must stay for a few days. Let me treat you well. With that, Xueqi led Ji Tianxing and Forefather 3 Absolutes through the mountain gate and towards the peak of the mountain. The old drunkard in the stone house immediately jumped out and pulled Xueqi's sleeve. Little lion, what are you doing? Xueqi bowed to the old drunkard and said with a smile. Old man, this is young Master Ji Tianxing, the #1 genius of the continent, the youngest imperial prince and realm lord. He is also my great benefactor. Not only did he save my life, he also taught me many things. I've been thinking about when I'll be able to meet Big brother Tianxing again. I didn't expect him to really come looking for me. Old Drunkard frowned slightly and subconsciously glanced at Ji Tianqing, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. However, his expression immediately returned to normal. He nodded to Shi Zhongjian and said with a smile, "Since that's the case, you have to treat him well. Don't neglect your esteemed guest." With that, Old Drunkard carried his wine gourd and went back into the stone house. Ji Tianqing glanced at Old Drunkard and followed Shi Zhongjian to the peak of the mountain. Along the way, he asked with a voice transmission, "Lion, who is this Old Drunkard? Why would such a powerful expert be reduced to such a sorry state and have to guard the mountain gate?" Shi Zhongjian was stunned for a moment, then he withdrew the smile on his face and said with a complicated tone, "This old man was once the left protector of our sect. When he was young, he was also elegant and very dignified. However, he had always loved our sect leader and was infatuated with her for 300 years. Finally, one day, he couldn't help but confess his feelings in front of others. He was heartlessly rejected by the sect leader and was punished. Since then, the left protector resigned from his position as protector and volunteered to guard the mountain gate. He drank himself to death every day." Hearing Shi Zhongjian's words, Ji Tianqing suddenly opened his eyes wide. He quickly interrupted him and asked, "Wait a moment, Old Drunkard, he actually fell in love with your sect leader? This is too ridiculous, isn't it? Is his taste so heavy?" "Yes." Shi Zhongjian nodded and said with a sigh, "How could a protector of our sect fall in love with the sect leader? Isn't this going against the rules? Of course, the sect leader would reject him." Ji Tianqing nodded and said sympathetically, "He's a soul-refining realm cultivator after all. I can't believe he has that kind of fetish. He even dared to confess his feelings in front of everyone. No wonder he became so sloppy. However, he is also very infatuated. Even though he was rejected by the man he loves, he still stayed in the Hidden God sect to guard the sect." This time, it was Shi Zhongjian's turn to be stunned. He stared blankly at Ji Tianqing and said with a strange tone, Wait a moment. Big brother Tianqing, are you mistaken?" "Mistaken about what?" Ji Tianqing asked subconsciously. Shi Zhongjian lowered his voice and said with a strange tone, "Our sect leader's surname is Xueqi. She is a woman." A woman?" Ji Tianqing was also stunned. His expression became very strange, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Shi Zhongjian stared at him with wide eyes and said blankly, "What do you think? This misunderstanding was too big." Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes, who was standing at the side, heard everything clearly and almost burst out laughing. However, he kept his head down and his shoulders trembling. It was obvious that he was having a hard time holding back his laughter. An hour later, Ji Tianqing and Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes settled down in the Hidden God sect. The mountain peak was vast and there were 16 palaces and courtyards in total. It could accommodate 3,000 people. However, there were only a little more than 1,000 people in the Hidden God sect, including the disciples, servants and guards. Therefore, the palaces and courtyards were very quiet and secluded. Shi Zhongjian arranged a small courtyard for Ji Tianqing. After Shi Zhongjian helped Ji Tianqing settle down, he sat in the living room with Ji Tianqing, drinking tea and chatting. Ji Tianqing didn't want to waste time and went straight to the point. "Lion, I came to the Hidden God sect this time for an extremely important matter. I want to see your sect leader as soon as possible. I remember you said that you are the second disciple of the Hidden God sect. You should be able to see the sect leader, right?" Shi Zhongjian hesitated and frowned. He explained awkwardly, "Big brother Tianqing, I know that you have something important to do. If I can help you, I will definitely do it. However, Lord Sect Leader has always been mysterious and rarely shows herself. The sect's affairs have always been managed by the Great Elder and my master. In the past 10 years, I have only seen Lord Sect Leader once. It is said that Lord Sect Leader has always been in secluded cultivation. Even if I want to help you, I'm afraid that I won't be able to see her." Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with disappointment. However, he immediately had an idea and said, "If that's the case, then take me to see your master. I will tell her the whole story and let her pass it on to your sect leader." Chapter 1329. Shi Zhongjian immediately fulfilled his promise and brought Ji Tianqing to see his master. His master was the second elder of the Hidden God sect, a soul refinement realm expert who had cultivated for 400 years. The second elder doted on Shi Zhongjian very much. When she learned that Shi Zhongjian had something to discuss with her, she immediately put down whatever she was doing and received him and Ji Tianqing in the living room. When Ji Tianqing saw the second elder, he realized that she was a middle-aged woman. She looked graceful, elegant, and kind. The two exchanged greetings, and when the second elder learned of Ji Tianqing's identity, she was very grateful to him. After all, Shi Zhongjian had already told the second elder about his adventure with Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing exchanged a few pleasantries, and then told the second elder the reason for his visit. Second elder, I am here on the orders of the emperor to discuss an important matter with your sect master. Unfortunately, your sect master is very secretive, so I would like to ask the second elder to help me pass on a message. The second elder nodded slightly and said in a gentle voice, Young Master Ji, if this old woman can help with this matter, I will definitely do so. But please understand that our sect master is in secluded cultivation and cannot be disturbed. Can you please tell this old woman why the emperor of the human race sent you here? If the matter is very urgent, this old woman can only pass on the message to Lord Sect Master. Otherwise, this old woman cannot rashly disturb the sect master's cultivation. Ji Tianqing saw the second elder's expression and guessed that she didn't know either. Sigh. The hidden god sect has hidden this matter very well. Even Elder Lian Heir doesn't know that the hidden god sect is a subordinate force of the emperor. What should we do now that the sect master of the hidden god sect is in secluded cultivation? Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and sighed in his heart. After a moment of silence, he looked at the second elder with sincere eyes and said in a serious tone, Second elder, your sect is a hidden sect and has always been in seclusion. Perhaps you don't know the significance of the emperor's decree of the human race's emperor. However, I have to tell you that this matter is of utmost importance. It is even related to the fate and survival of the hidden god sect. As long as you seek an audience with your sect master and tell her that the emperor has sent someone here with a decree, she will definitely know what to do. Hearing how serious Ji Yunshu was, the second elder was shocked. His eyes widened and he said in disbelief, Young Master Ji, don't be an alarmist. I swear on my head. Ji Tianqing said solemnly. The second elder stared at him for a while before nodding. All right, this old one is willing to believe young Master Ji this once. Young Master Ji, please go back and rest. This old one will inform the sect master as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing was very clear that the second elder was only temporarily pacifying him. He definitely couldn't make a decision on his own and would have to discuss it with the great elder. However, he couldn't say anything more. He could only get up and leave. By the time he returned to his courtyard, it was already late at night. Shi Zhongjian carried 2 pots of wine and excitedly ran over to drink with him, but he was stopped by him. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was also put into the sword world. He sat alone on the roof, bathing in the faint starlight and moonlight. He overlooked the entire Sunless Peak and the vast mountain range around it. Under the curtain of night, Sunless Peak was exceptionally quiet and serene, as if it had been forgotten by the world. There was a strong sense of loneliness and desolation. Ji Tianqing suddenly understood. No wonder Shi Zhongjian's personality was so simple, so sincere and passionate to others, and even a little silly at times. He lived on Sunless Peak for many years and had almost no contact with the outside world. Naturally, he could maintain a simple personality and treat others with sincerity. Even in the darkness of the night, the vast mountain range around Sunless Peak was still emitting smoke and flames from time to time. In the deep ravines and mountain streams in the distance, there were also streams of dark red light flowing. That was magma overflowing from the ground. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought silently. It seems that other than the sect master of the hidden god sect, no one else knows about the relationship between the hidden god sect and the imperial court, much less the existence of the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. I don't know how long it will take for second elder to report this to sect master Xueqi. If that's the case, I can only think of another way and go find it myself. Finished speaking, he returned to his room and sat down. He closed his eyes and released his soul power, extending it in all directions to explore the entire Sunless Peak. His soul power was like an inescapable net that covered the entire Sunless Peak. Soon, the dozen or so palaces and mansions on the mountain peak, as well as the bricks and stones on the mountain peak, were clearly imprinted in his mind. He could clearly detect that there were 5 soul refinement realm experts and dozens of heaven origin realm experts in the palaces and mansions. Among these experts, the old drunkard guarding the mountain gate was the strongest. Ji Tianqing was a little puzzled. He repeatedly checked several times, but the result was still the same. The sect master of the Hidden God sect is definitely stronger than the old drunkard. She is most likely a supreme expert of the primordial spirit realm. But I have searched the entire Sunless Peak and did not detect the aura of a supreme primordial spirit realm expert. It seems that sect master Xueqi is not on Sunless Peak. But if she is not on Sunless Peak, where could she be cultivating in seclusion? Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind, and he had a guess. That's right. Deep underground. The Imperial Emperor once said that there is a vast sea of magma deep in the Earth's core under Sunless Peak. That heavenly dipper god fire cauldron is sleeping in the magma sea. Could it be that sect master Xueqi is cultivating deep underground? Or is she guarding that divine cauldron personally? After this thought appeared in his mind, he impatiently manipulated his soul power to pass through Sunless Peak and explore deep underground. With his current strength, his soul power could cover 100 miles. He was confident that his soul could extend 100 miles and explore the situation deep underground. However, when his soul passed through Sunless Peak and extended 80 miles, it was blocked by a layer of dark red barrier. That layer of dark red barrier was like a curtain of flame that stretched across the rock layer underground. He tried a few times, but he could not break through the barrier and see the situation deep inside. Moreover, that barrier covered an area of 100 miles. It was so wide that it seemed boundless. Ji Tianqing was helpless. At the same time, he was even more certain that sect master Xueqi was very likely deep underground. He thought for a moment, then got up and left the small courtyard. He personally entered Sunless Peak and dived deep underground. In order to not be discovered by the elders of the Hidden God sect and cause unnecessary misunderstandings, he was very careful. He restrained his soul aura and slowed down his diving speed. It took him half an hour to reach 80 miles underground. It was pitch black all around, and there were scorching rock layers everywhere. The temperature underground was extremely high. Even those hard rocks that did not melt had a hint of dark red. Ji Tianqing slowly approached the dark red barrier and prepared to observe that mysterious barrier. But at this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded behind him. Chapter 1330. Ji Tianqing was about to take a closer look at the mysterious dark red light screen. Suddenly, a voice came from behind him. The voice was cold and the tone was full of mockery. He subconsciously turned his head and saw a black figure standing in a rock crack 100 steps behind him. Near the dark red light screen, there were wide rock cracks and holes. They seemed to be traces left behind by a volcanic eruption. Ji Tianqing was also standing on a rock, frowning as he sized up the figure. It was a sloppy man with knotted hair. His clothes were greasy and full of holes. There was no doubt that it was the old drunkard who was guarding the mountain gate. However, he was not holding a wine gourd at the moment, nor was he as drunk as he was during the day. His eyes were clear and bright, and his body was no longer hunched. He was actually emitting an invisible and powerful aura. At this moment, he was no longer a sloppy drunkard. He had truly recovered the aura and majesty of a top expert. He stared at Ji Tianqing with a fierce look in his eyes, sneered and said with a cold tone, "I've long known that you, little rascal, tried every means to sneak into our sect because you're up to no good." This old man was right. You sneaked into our sect's forbidden area in the middle of the night on your first day in our sect. How audacious! As he spoke, he released an invisible spiritual pressure that pressed down on Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was indifferent. He looked at him calmly and asked, "With my strength, it is impossible for you to get within 300 meters of me without making a sound. How did you do it?" "Ha ha ha, you don't need to know." The old drunkard sneered disdainfully. "This old man is an expert at the 9th level of the soul-refining realm. How can I not have secret techniques and consummate skills? Moreover, this is Sunless Peak. This old man has lived here for hundreds of years. I am very familiar with every brick and stone here." Ji Tianqing nodded and stopped asking about this matter. He said with a calm expression, "I know. Even if I told you that I have no evil intentions towards the Hidden God sect and that I am only doing this because of an emergency, you wouldn't believe me, would you?" Humph. Old drunkard pursed his lips and sneered. Ji Tianqing nodded again, spread out his hands and said, "If that's the case, then there's nothing more to say. Let's fight." The old drunkard frowned and shouted in a deep voice, "Kid, you're up to no good. You've been caught red-handed by this old man, yet you don't have the slightest intention of remorse. You still dare to be so arrogant? I have a clear conscience. Why should I repent? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked. How stubborn. Old drunkard scolded angrily. He pointed behind him and said, This old man can see that you're a talented man with decent strength. If you have the guts, then fight with this old man outside. Don't hurt the innocent disciples of our sect. Ji Tianqing naturally nodded in agreement. Of course, I have no ill intentions towards the hidden god sect, and I do not wish to harm anyone. Hypocrite! Old drunkard snorted coldly again, turned around and flew out. The two of them were like lightning, shuttling through the ground at high speed. After a short 10 breaths, the two of them left Sunless Peak and flew towards the mountains in the distance. After 100 breaths, the two of them flew 300 miles before Old Drunkard stopped in the air above a valley. Kid, let's fight here. It won't affect our sect. Since you're young, this old man will let you make the first move. Old Drunkard put his left hand behind his back and waved his right hand, making a pleased gesture. He had the demeanor of a master. Ji Tianqing stared at him and said calmly, Senior, I don't want to hurt you, so let's stop here. Moreover, I don't want to alarm the elders and disciples of your sect. If you want to leak information, then don't blame me. Old Drunkard immediately grinned and sneered. Ha! Kid, weren't you quite rampant just now? Now that you have a guilty conscience, why are you still afraid of being found out? This old man will take you down and hand you over to our sect's elders to be punished according to our sect's laws. Ji Tianqing frowned and cupped his fists, saying, If that's the case, then I can only offend you. As his voice fell, he did not give Old Drunkard any time to react and drew his broken sword as fast as lightning. Draw your sword. With a pitch-black broken sword in hand, a blazing white sword light with a tinge of purple instantly slashed out. It cut through the dark night and slashed towards Old Drunkard. You're really something. Old Drunkard's expression changed and his eyes flashed wildly. Without hesitation, he took out his wine gourd and released an incomparably vigorous dermic power into the wine gourd. Swoosh! The green-skinned gourd suddenly expanded and became a huge gourd over 100 feet tall, emitting a soaring green light. The dazzling sword light slashed at the green gourd with a loud bang, and a loud muffled sound was heard. The green light that filled the sky was shattered and splashed in all directions, illuminating the night sky for hundreds of miles. The wine gourd was blasted away and smashed into a mountain dozens of miles away. The barren 10,000 feet tall mountain was smashed into pieces on the spot, collapsing into scorched earth and ruins all over the ground. In the ruins, flames and black smoke rose into the sky. An endless cloud of dust burst out, covering the night sky within a radius of tens of miles. After the sword light blasted the green gourd away, it did not shatter and slash towards Old Drunkard again. Old Drunkard's expression changed drastically. He raised his palms and condensed 2 huge green palms, trying to clamp down on the sword light that was hundreds of feet long. However, with a loud bang, the huge green palm was smashed into pieces. Old Drunkard was also sent flying, rolling and crashing into the valley. A huge crater was formed in the deep valley. Dust flew everywhere and flames soared into the sky. Ji Tianqing did not chase after him. He stood in the sky and looked down. After a while, Old Drunkard rushed out of the crater and flew back into the sky. His body was charred and his clothes were full of holes. More than half of his hair was curled, and his face was covered in ashes. He looked very miserable. Boy, I really underestimated you. However, I'm going to use my real strength now. Old Drunkard shouted angrily. With a flash of green light in his palm, a dark green sword appeared. He held the dark green sword with both hands. His body burst out with energy and his robe fluttered fiercely. A sword of separation. Old Drunkard activated all his skills and suddenly waved the dark green sword, slashing at Ji Tianqing fiercely. Suddenly, a huge sword light that was thousands of feet long tore the vast night sky apart. With the power to destroy heaven and earth, it arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. Wherever the sword light passed, the night sky was torn into 2 halves. It was as if it was separated into 2 spaces. Good sword technique. It's really something. Ji Tianqing could not help but praise when he saw the mystery of this sword technique. Of course, while praising, he also waved the sword of burial of heaven with a serious face and used a unique sword technique. Swing the sword. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and swung it out. A crescent-shaped sword light that was thousands of feet long was slashed towards Old Drunkard. The two sword lights, one green and one white, were almost the same size and power. Chapter 1331. Kaboom! When the two huge sword lights collided, a thunderous explosion resounded, shaking the heavens. Everything within 100 miles trembled violently, and a violent hurricane swept up the dust and smoke in the sky. The two sword lights collapsed at the same time, bursting into light fragments that illuminated half of the sky. However, this was not the final result. The two of them could not fight to a draw. After the crescent-shaped blazing white sword light collapsed, countless lightning arcs surged out, enveloping the Old Drunkard like an inescapable net. The Old Drunkard was caught off guard and was instantly enveloped by the huge lightning net. Following a series of crackling sounds, the Old Drunkard's body convulsed and twisted like a sieve under the bombardment of lightning. Then, his body was charred black and smoking as he fell straight down from the sky, crashing into the valley with a bang. Bang! Following a dull explosion, the Old Drunkard once again smashed a huge hole in the valley, splashing dust all over the sky. This gentlemanly duel came to an end. The loud explosion that reverberated between heaven and earth gradually dissipated, and the dust that covered the sky slowly settled down. The Old Drunkard's body was charred black and smoking as he lay in the deep hole, unable to move. From time to time, he would convulse and let out muffled groans. Ji Tianqing descended from the sky and came to the edge of the big hole, looking down at the Old Drunkard in the hole. After hesitating for a moment, he cupped his hands and said, "Senior, I'm sorry to offend you." Then, he waved his hands and used a secret technique. Rays of golden light condensed into a mysterious seal. Seal! After the seal was formed, he shouted and pointed at the Old Drunkard with both hands. That mysterious seal immediately drilled into the Old Drunkard's body and enveloped him. The power of the seal erupted and immediately sealed the Old Drunkard's physical body, magic power, and soul power. The Old Drunkard was like a piece of charred wood, lying motionless at the bottom of the hole, unable to make any sound. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and lifted him out of the deep hole. Then, he carried the Old Drunkard and flew back to Sunless Peak, quickly disappearing into the night. The commotion caused by the fight between the two of them was so great that it had alarmed the experts of the Hidden God sect. When Ji Tianqing returned to the Hidden God sect, there were many deacons, elders, and disciples checking the situation. There were even a few experts flying towards the scene of the incident. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing's movements were concealed, so he was not discovered by anyone. He brought Old Drunkard back to the small courtyard where he lived and threw Old Drunkard onto the bed. Unable to struggle or resist, the Old Drunkard could only stare at him with his eyes wide open, revealing a look of intense anger and questioning. Ji Tianqing saw his pitiful appearance and couldn't help but comfort him. "Senior, I had no choice but to do this. I can only ask you to suffer for a while." With that, he cast a spell and burrowed into the ground, diving deep into the ground. Half an hour later, he once again dived 80 miles into the ground and approached the dark red barrier. This time, no one disturbed him, so he focused on studying the dark red light curtain. A quarter of an hour later, he figured out that this dark red light curtain was a huge defensive formation. Moreover, this was a primordial spirit realm sealing array that sealed an area of 1,000 miles. In other words, if he wanted to enter Sunless Peak and find the magma ocean deep in the Earth's core, he had to pass through this defensive array. It's almost impossible for me to break a primordial spirit realm sealing array with my attainments and strength. But there's a primordial spirit realm sealing array hidden under Sunless Peak. It's very likely to be to hide a huge secret. It must be related to the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and pondered silently. He couldn't do anything about this sealing formation, but his heart was itching. He really wanted to enter and search for Sect Master Xueqi's traces. After all, he had already dealt with Old Drunkard, so he couldn't give up halfway, right? Just as he was frowning and thinking, the voice of the Burial of Heaven sounded in his mind. "It's just a low-grade primordial spirit realm sealing array. What's so difficult about it?" Suddenly hearing the voice of the Burial of Heaven, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed and he asked, "Burial of Heaven, can you break this array?" The Burial of Heaven was silent, as if it was secretly observing this array. After about 10 breaths, its voice sounded again. "It's indeed a low-grade primordial spirit realm sealing array, and it's a beginner-level primordial spirit realm sealing array. It doesn't even use the primordial spirit realm sealing array. If I'm not wrong, This is just a beginner-level heavenly breeze-flowing fire array. The person who set up this array has just reached the primordial spirit realm and his foundation is still shallow. This array has a radius of 1,000 miles, and with the help of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the power of the earth's core, it can continue to operate for tens of thousands of years without drying up. Hearing the words of the burial of heaven, Ji Tianqing felt much more at ease. Since you know so much about this array, I'm relieved. The burial of heaven said indifferently, I can't break the array with my divine soul avatar, but I'll pass on the method to break the array to you and help you at the critical moment. I guarantee that you'll be able to break it. Good. Ji Tianqing nodded excitedly and quickly replied, I'm ready, let's start now. Then listen carefully. The burial of heaven said in a low and solemn voice, the heavenly breeze-flowing fire array is only a beginner-level primordial spirit realm sealing array. It only uses 12 methods of setting up the array, which are, the burial of heaven told Ji Tianqing the method of setting up the heavenly breeze-flowing fire array, its structure and principles, and taught him the method to break it. After 15 minutes, when the burial of heaven finished, Ji Tianqing memorized the method to break the array and seriously studied it for a long time. After an hour, after he had completely understood, he waved his palms and used his mana to break the array. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Streaks of dark golden light streaked across the night sky like water pillars and landed on the dark red light barrier. The light barrier suddenly trembled slightly, and endless dark red flames splashed out and spread in all directions. Ji Tianqing was in the sea of fire and was surrounded by rolling flames, but he did not feel any pain. He continued to focus on breaking the array. He did his best to break the array and forgot about the passage of time. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. The method to break the array was about to be completed, and a crack could already be clearly seen on the dark red light barrier. Finally, at the critical moment, the burial of heaven's sword flew over without hesitation, releasing a powerful and mysterious black light, and stabbed into the crack. An invisible and majestic power immediately poured into the dark red light barrier and spread along the lines of the array. Crack! With a crisp sound, a wash basin-sized gap appeared on the dark red light barrier. A stream of crimson fire as thick as a bucket suddenly gushed out like a fountain. Chapter 1332. Even though the core fire was very powerful, Ji Tianqing was not afraid at all. He immediately held the sword of burial of heaven and flew toward the gap. Swoosh! He turned into a streak of golden light, passed through the gushing dark red flames, and entered the gap. In the next moment, he entered the heavenly wind-flowing fire array. As far as the eye could see, there was a dark red color everywhere. Around him was the dark night sky, with red flames floating in spirals, surging like waves. 10 miles below him was a crimson sea filled with dark red magma. The endless magma flowed slowly, emitting red flames that soared into the sky, turning the surroundings into a sea of fire. Ji Tianqing was in the rolling sea of fire, enduring the terrifying heat at all times. But his body had been refined to the extreme, and his defense was extremely strong. He was not afraid of the core fire at all. He looked around and quickly saw that this magma sea was very wide, as if it had no end. Above him was the rock layer, below him was the magma sea, and there was a 10-mile space in between. Such a strange terrain was very rare in the depths of the earth. He was sure that this magma sea had always existed since ancient times. Moreover, Sect Master Xueqi and the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron he was looking for were in this magma sea. But this magma sea was too vast, and it was too difficult to find a person and a divine cauldron. Ji Tianqing had no other choice. He could only release his soul power into the magma sea and search from the south to the north. He flew above the magma sea, and wherever he passed, his soul power would scan the surrounding 30 miles, carefully searching. This vast sea of lava was not simple. It contained an invisible and mysterious power that suppressed the power of his soul. In the outside world, his soul power could search a radius of 100 miles. But in this magma sea, he could only search a radius of 30 miles. Unknowingly, 2 hours passed. Ji Tianqing carefully searched the magma sea within a radius of 200 miles. Unfortunately, he did not find any clues, and there was no trace of Sect Master Xueqi or the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. He could only expand the search area and search patiently. Time passed quietly, and soon, 10 hours had passed. Ji Tianqing searched a radius of 2,000 miles and searched the entire sea of lava, but he still couldn't find Patriarch Xueqi and the Heavenly Dipper Godfire Cauldron. But in the process, he encountered several powerful demonic beasts that lived in the magma ocean. There was a lava giant that was hundreds of meters tall. Its entire body was condensed from lava, and it possessed extremely terrifying power. There were also some fire spirits that were more than 10 meters tall and had a variety of forms. They usually looked like dark red fireballs, sleeping quietly in the sea of lava. Once an enemy approached, those fire spirits would be awakened and transform into various forms, nimbly and swiftly launching attacks. Other than that, there were also 2 dark golden fire pythons entrenched in the sea of lava. These demonic beasts were all rare species. In the sea of magma, they had unique cultivation conditions, and their strength grew very quickly. These demonic beasts were all at the 2nd and 3rd level of the soul-refining realm. When they discovered Ji Tianqing, they were intimidated by his powerful aura and retreated far away. Only those few fire spirits tried to attack a few times. However, Ji Tianqing easily repelled them, scaring them into hurriedly fleeing, not daring to harass him again. I've already searched for 10 hours and searched the entire sea of lava, but I still can't find Patriarch Xueqi and the Heavenly Dipper Godfire Cauldron. The seal I placed on the old drunkard only lasts for 12 hours. The time is almost up. If I still can't find Patriarch Xueqi, after the old drunkard seal is removed, this matter will be exposed. At that time, I'm afraid there will be some twists and turns, and there will be some unnecessary misunderstandings and conflicts. Ji Tianqing pondered silently, then furrowed his brows anxiously. He couldn't understand. He had clearly searched the entire sea of lava, but why couldn't he find Patriarch Xueqi and the Heavenly Dipper Godfire Cauldron? Could it be that Patriarch Xueqi and the cauldron weren't in the sea of lava, and his deduction was wrong? After pondering hard for a long time, Ji Tianqing suddenly had a flash of inspiration as he thought of a certain possibility. If they're not in the sea of lava, could they be even deeper down? Thinking of this, he hurriedly drilled into the sea of lava, and flew even deeper underground. The temperature of the lava was terrifyingly hot, enough to melt ordinary soul-level magic treasures. Ji Tianqing's body was wrapped in a layer of golden light, protecting himself. He could freely travel through the sea of lava, and he wouldn't be harmed. Soon, he passed through the sea of lava more than 20 miles deep, and drilled into the underground rock layer. He released his spiritual power, and spread it out in all directions, carefully searching underground. About 2 hours later, he came to the center of the sea of lava, and it was located in the rock layer 120 miles underground. Suddenly, his spiritual power detected a majestic spiritual power fluctuation in the rock layer not far in front of him. There was also a dark red flowing fire that enveloped the rock layer in a radius of 10 miles, like a huge ball of light. Finally found it. It must be here. Ji Tianqing's spirit was immediately shaken, and he hurriedly drilled forward. In the blink of an eye, he came close to the flowing fireball. After careful observation with his spiritual power, he found that there was a huge cave hidden in the rock layer wrapped in the ball of light. That cave was at least 1,000 feet wide. The vast and mighty divine soul power and the violent and powerful flame aura were coming from that cave. However, the cave was protected by the flowing fireball. If he wanted to enter and check the situation in the cave, he had to break the huge light shield of the fireball. He carefully observed for a long time, and found that this huge flowing fireball was also a light shield formed by a defensive formation. This formation was the Heavenly Wind Flowing Fire Formation that he had broken before, but it was a smaller version of the formation, and its power was more condensed, and its defense was stronger. But this was not a problem for him. He repeated the same trick, and used all his strength to break the formation. After 2 hours, he broke a hole in the light shield formed by the dark red flowing fire. Swoosh! He turned into a golden flowing light, passed through the hole, and entered the formation. He walked along the thick rock layer for about 10,000 feet, and then entered an empty cave. Only now did he see the situation in the cave. The cave was oval in shape like an egg, and the surrounding rock walls were rough and uneven. It was obvious that it was naturally formed. The originally dark rock walls were burned red by the geocentric fire. The entire cave was filled with flowing fire, and it was vast and mighty like a flood. In the middle of the cave, there was a golden altar that was 300 feet wide and 10 feet tall. At the top of the ancient and mysterious altar, there was an ancient bronze cauldron as large as a house. Chapter 1333. Ji Tianqing's eyes were glued to the bronze dragon tripod. He could not take his eyes off of it. The style of the bronze tripod was ancient and simple. There were no complicated patterns or patterns. It was simple but majestic. Other than the 6 ears and 9 dragons as decorations, there were 4 lines of ancient words engraved on the tripod. Even with his knowledge and experience, he could not identify what those words were. He only knew that this ancient, mysterious and majestic bronze tripod must be the Big Dipper Godfire tripod that he was about to get. The divine tripod stood motionless at the top of the altar. There was a hint of dark red on the tripod and it emitted a terrifying heat. Inside the bronze tripod, there was an endless amount of heavenly wind and flowing fire. It was spewed out from the mouths of the 9 dragons, forming 9 dragon-shaped fire pillars that did not dissipate for a long time. Ji Tianqing stared at the divine tripod with bright eyes. He was in awe and his heart was moved. But at this moment, a cold and dignified female voice suddenly sounded in the cave. "Who are you?" Ji Tianqing was suddenly awakened. He immediately turned his head and looked to the north of the cave. He saw that at the northern edge of the cave, there was a 10-foot-high platform. There was a wide throne on it. The throne was very exquisite and beautiful. It was inlaid with all kinds of dark red, dark gold and dazzling purple gems. It exuded a sacred and luxurious aura. Most importantly, this throne was extremely beneficial to one's cultivation. On the luxurious throne sat an old woman in a luxurious green robe. The old woman looked like she was in her 70s or 80s. Her waist-long hair had turned silver and was tied up in a dignified and elegant bun with a jade hairpin. But the old woman's face did not look old. Her skin was still white and soft. She was no different from a woman in her 30s. Her face could not be called beautiful, but she had a dignified and elegant temperament. She looked extremely noble. Her eyes were bright and deep. They contained the light of wisdom, but they were not aggressive. Even though she was glaring at Ji Tianqing, the uninvited guest, with hostility emanating from her body, her gaze was not fierce. Ji Tianqing believed that one's face was a reflection of one's heart. Looking at this silver-haired old woman's face and eyes, he could guess that she must be a kind and benevolent old woman. However, even though the silver-haired old woman's aura was gentle, her body contained enough power to shake the heavens and earth. Her aura was incomparably powerful, as vigorous as a mountain, causing Ji Tianqing to feel reverence in his heart. He could almost immediately determine that the strength of the silver-haired old woman had long surpassed the spirit refinement realm and reached the essence spirit realm. After a moment of silence, he walked to the center of the cave and bowed to the silver-haired old woman from afar. However, before he could say his name, the silver-haired old woman's expression changed drastically when she saw his face. She had been sitting on the throne, meditating and cultivating the whole time. At this moment, she widened her eyes in shock and stared at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. She actually sat up with a swoosh. "You? Master?" The silver-haired old woman's expression was very complicated. Her eyes flickered, and the rim of her eyes was a little wet. She held the throne with one hand and stood up with a trembling body. She quickly walked toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing immediately swallowed the words he was about to say, and looked at the silver-haired old woman with confusion. "Strange, I haven't said my name and identity. Why is she so emotional? No, she doesn't even know me. Even if she saw me, she wouldn't be so emotional. She must have mistaken me for someone else." Thinking of this, he quickly said to the silver-haired old woman, "Senior, if I'm not wrong, you are Master Xueqi of the Hidden God sect, right?" "I am Ji Tianqing, the domain lord of the Tianqian domain. I have come to the Hidden God sect to visit Master Xueqi under the orders of the Emperor." After saying this, he took out the seal of mountains and rivers and presented it to the silver-haired old woman. The silver-haired old woman's body stiffened, and she was stunned on the spot. She frowned and stared at Ji Tianqing for a long time. Then she muttered in a low voice, "Impossible. How can there be such a similar person in this world?" After a while, she suppressed the shock and excitement in her heart and calmed down. She stared at the seal of mountains and rivers and observed it carefully for a moment. Then she sized up Ji Tianqing a few times before speaking in a calm tone. "I am the sect master of the Hidden God sect, Xueqi Ruoyu. Young man, did you just say that you are the domain lord of the Tianqian domain, Ji Tianqing?" "That's right, it's me." Ji Tianqing suppressed the doubts in his heart and nodded calmly. Xueqi Ruoyu continued to stare at him and asked, "You have come to our sect to look for me under the orders of the Emperor of the human race?" "Yes." Ji Tianqing nodded again. He didn't show it on his face, but he was muttering in his heart, so the master of the hidden god sect is called Xue Ruoyu. Such an elegant name. She must have been a beauty when she was young. However, she is the master of a sect, a primordial spirit realm expert. Who did she think I was just now? How could she lose her composure and be so emotional? At this time, Xue Ruoyu turned and walked back to the throne and sat down gracefully. She looked down at Ji Tianqing with deep eyes and said in a dignified tone, "Since you claim to be under the orders of the emperor, do you have the emperor's decree? If you don't have the emperor's personal decree, no matter what you say, I will not forgive you for trespassing on the forbidden grounds." Ji Tianqing was already prepared. He quickly took out the emperor's personal decree from his spatial ring. "Master Xue, I had no choice but to trespass on the forbidden grounds. Your sect has hidden the matters regarding the divine cauldron and the imperial court too deeply. Even the elders in the sect don't know about it. I couldn't see you, so I decided to trespass on my own." He gave a simple explanation. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and shot out a golden light. It wrapped around the emperor's decree and flew to Xue Ruoyu. Xue Ruoyu stretched out her hand to receive the decree. She waved her hand and shot out rays of golden light. She executed a secret technique to undo the seal on the scroll. After a moment, the scroll slowly unfolded and floated in front of her. It lit up with a dazzling golden light. Ji Tianqing didn't know what was written in the emperor's decree. He only saw that when Xue Ruoyu saw the contents of the decree, her expression changed slightly. Her eyes even flashed with shock and disbelief. In fact, Xue Ruoyu couldn't help but take a few more glances at him before she finished reading the decree. This made him even more puzzled. He secretly guessed. What did the emperor say in the decree? Isn't it to take away the divine cauldron? After a long while, Xue Ruoyu finished reading the decree. She then kept the scroll and solemnly kept it in her spatial ring. She looked at Ji Tianqing with a burning gaze. Her gaze was complicated. She seemed to be excited and her heart was filled with emotions. After a moment of silence, she then asked, "Ji Tianqing, are you really the successor of the Kenshin?" Chapter 1334. Could it be that the monarch had pointed out my identity in the edict and said that I am the successor of the Kenshin? This was the first thought that appeared in Ji Tianqing's mind. He nodded at Xue Ruoyu and answered truthfully, "That's right." Xue Ruoyu's pupils contracted as her emotions became even more complicated. She actually sighed. She lowered her head slightly as a trace of sadness appeared in her eyes, as if she was recalling something from the past. A moment later, she continued to ask, "Tianqing, can you tell this old one how you obtained the Kenshin inheritance?" This. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and hesitated to answer. He could naturally see that Xue Ruoyu's impression and attitude towards him had become much closer after learning that he was the successor of the Kenshin. He could no longer suppress the doubts in his heart as he asked Xue Ruoyu, "Sect Master Xue, this junior doesn't quite understand. Why are you asking about the Kenshin? This junior has come to the hidden god sect under the monarch's orders to take away the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. What does this have to do with the Kenshin?" Xue Ruoyu was startled for a moment before she laughed involuntarily. Her laughter actually contained some bitterness and self-mockery. "Tianqing, don't be anxious about the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. We can talk about it later. This old one only respects and admires the Kenshin. After learning that you are the successor of the Kenshin, I want to know more about you. You should be able to understand this old one's feelings, right?" Ji Tianqing shook his head as he said in a low voice, "Sect Master Xue, this junior may be young, but I am not someone who is ignorant of worldly affairs. When this junior barged into the cave just now, your mind was already in chaos the moment you saw this junior. You lost your composure and even mistook this junior for someone else. This junior is certain that you do not simply respect and admire the Kenshin. It is very likely that you are related to the Kenshin in some way." As he spoke, he stared intently at Xue Ruoyu, observing the changes in her expression. As expected, Xue Ruoyu's complexion changed slightly. Her gaze was somewhat evasive. She didn't dare to look directly into his eyes. Seeing her reaction, Ji Tianqing was even more certain. He continued, "A long time ago, a peerless master once told me that Kenshin had never taken in any disciples when he was alive, but he had 4 followers who could be considered his in-name disciples. The surnames of these 4 in-name disciples were Gu, Yi, Xiao, and Xue. As the descendant of the sword god, I have a mission, and that is to find these 4 seniors. Before this, I had already found Yi Hengchuan and Xiao Wentian. Ren Huangyi lived in seclusion in the boundless realm of the Mangu mountain range. He guarded the city alone and waited bitterly for one person. On the other hand, Xiao Wentian lived in seclusion in the great swamp of the southern wasteland and established the Xiao clan, an ancient family. He had long since flourished and had many children and grandchildren, enjoying the rest of his life. Of the 4 seniors, only Gu and Xue have not been found, and there have been no clues. Ji Tianxing spoke frankly with assurance. When Xue Ruyu heard these words, she tilted her head slightly. Her expression was very complicated as she remained silent. Ji Tianxing revealed a slight smile and said calmly, "When I came to the Hidden God sect previously, I only wanted to follow orders to retrieve the divine cauldron. I never thought about this matter. Even when I knew that the surname of the sect master of the Hidden God sect was Xue, I never thought about this. It was only now that I finally understand why you were so agitated. Even as an immortal soul stage master, you actually lost your composure. Sect Master Xue, if I'm not wrong, you are one of the 4 in-name disciples of Kenshin, Guyi, Xiao, Xue and Xue, right?" After he finished speaking, he looked at Xue Ruoyu with a look of intense anticipation. Xue Ruoyu was silent for a long time before she slowly turned her head to look at him. At this moment, not only did she look a little sad, but her eyes were also covered with a thin layer of mist. As an immortal soul stage master and a sect master, her heart was as still as water. She was an expert with a strong will and wouldn't lose her composure easily. If her will wasn't strong enough, how could she have guarded the Hidden God sect and protected the divine cauldron for hundreds of years? But now that she saw Ji Tianxing and heard Ji Tianxing talk about the past, she couldn't help but cry. This was because Ji Tianxing's guess was right. She was indeed the 4th disciple of Kenshin, Xue Ruoyu. Furthermore, she had many stories, and her heart was filled with too much pain. "Tianxing, you are indeed Master's successor. Master's legacy will definitely be brought to greater heights in your hands. When you speak with fervor and assurance, your confident appearance and high spirits are so similar to Master back then." Xue Ruoyu looked at Ji Tianxing and squeezed out a smile. Her tone was filled with emotion and reminiscence. When Ji Tianxing saw her expression and eyes, he suddenly felt a sense of déjà vu, and his heart was touched. "I seem to have seen Sect Master Xue's expression and eyes on Xiao Ling before. That's a kind of regret of not being able to love someone deeply. But compared to Xiao Ling there's more despair and reminiscence in her eyes. After all, Kenshin is already dead. Sect Master Xue will never be able to see him again. Could it be that Sect Master Xue, as an in-name disciple of Kenshin, has fallen in love with Kenshin for her entire life?" This thought suddenly flashed across Ji Tianxing's mind, and he was stunned. At the same time, Burial of Heaven's deep and aged voice sounded in his mind. "You brat. You finally understood." Ji Tianxing understood what it meant and felt that it was unbelievable. "Burial of Heaven, did I guess correctly?" Burial of Heaven didn't reply to him. It said to Xue Ruoyu in a deep and solemn tone, "Ah Xue, thousands of years have passed. You've also gone from a budding age to a white-haired person today. Why can't you resolve the knot in your heart and let him go?" Xue Ruoyu was secretly upset. Suddenly hearing Burial of Heaven's voice, her body shook. She raised her sleeve to wipe away the tears in her eyes. She immediately turned her head and looked at Ji Tianxing with a burning gaze. She asked in disbelief, "Burial of Heaven? Is that its voice?" Ji Tianxing didn't say anything. He only nodded calmly. Burial of Heaven's voice sounded again. Its tone was filled with vicissitudes and emotions. Kenshin was obsessed with the way of the sword his entire life. He was born for the way of the martial way and died for the way of the divine way. There are many women like you who are infatuated with him without regret. But who can get his attention and love? Back then when Kenshin left, I reminded you not to be too emotional. In the end, the one who will be hurt will only be yourself. I didn't expect that after thousands of years, you would still be infatuated with him without regret. It's a pity that Kenshin won't be able to see it." This time, Xue Ruoyu heard it clearly. She was immediately sure that this was indeed Burial of Heaven's voice. She stared at Ji Tianxing with a burning gaze and said in a complicated tone, "Tianxing, you actually obtained the Burial of Heaven's sword? What is its current situation?" Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. He directly took out the broken barrier of heaven and presented it in front of Xue Ruoyu. Xue Ruoyu's expression changed. Her figure flashed and flew over, landing beside Ji Tianqing. She stared at the barrier of heaven's sword and asked anxiously, "Barrier of heaven? It really is you. Back then when you left with Master, where did you go?" Chapter 1335. Xue Ruoyu could not believe her eyes. She could not believe that after 1,000 years, she would be able to see the sword of burial of heaven again. She was very emotional. After seeing the burial of heaven, she could no longer hold back her anxiety and doubts. She could not wait to ask the burial of heaven what had happened back then. This question had been hidden in her heart for 1,000 years. It had always been an unsolved mystery. Now, she could finally ask the burial of heaven personally. She would soon know the answer. She could not help but stretch out her hands and hold the sword of burial of heaven. She looked at it expectantly, waiting for its answer. The burial of heaven was silent for a while before it said in a low voice, "Ah Xue, when Kenshin fell, I was also heavily injured and was almost completely destroyed. Even though I've awakened now, my memories are fragmented and incomplete. I can't remember clearly what happened in the past." Xue Ruoyu's body suddenly stiffened. The anticipation and anxiety in her heart gradually dissipated. "No. How could this be? Burial of heaven, you must know. You must know what happened. Think about it carefully. You will definitely remember. What happened to Master?" The burial of heaven saw that she was getting more and more emotional. It comforted her. "I know that you have been worried for 1,000 years. This question has also troubled you for 1,000 years. But I really can't remember clearly. I can only wait until I recover my vitality and gradually recover my memories. Only then will I know what happened." Ji Tianqing stood silently at the side, listening to the burial of heaven comforting Xue Ruoyu. He did not open his mouth to interrupt. After a long time, Xue Ruoyu's emotions gradually calmed down. She endured the sadness and sorrow in her heart and temporarily put this matter aside. She sat back on the throne. After a while, she returned to her usual appearance. She was still as calm and serene as before. Ji Tianqing looked at her silently. Seeing her joy and sorrow, he gradually understood her feelings. It seems that Sect Master Xue is also a person with a lot of stories. She was infatuated with Kenshin. Even if 1,000 years had passed, she would never regret it. The left protector was infatuated with her and even confessed his feelings to her in public, but she heartlessly rejected him. In the end, he became an old drunkard who drank to drown his sorrows. Sigh. The word love is hard to describe in a few words. The bitterness in Sect Master Xue's heart has been buried deep for 1,000 years. Today, after seeing me and the burial of heaven, it is normal for her to lose her composure. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind, and he couldn't help but murmur in a low voice, "Once I see Kenshin, I'll make a mistake for life. If I don't see Kenshin, I'll make a mistake for life." At this time, Xue Ruoyu looked at Ji Tianqing with clear eyes and said calmly, "Tianqing, I lost my composure just now and let you see a joke. However, we were talking about private matters just now. Now, this old woman will talk business with you." Ji Tianqing nodded and bowed slightly. "Please speak, Sect Master Xue." Xue Ruoyu's expression was solemn, and she said solemnly, "Since you are here on the orders of the Emperor, you must already know the origin of the Heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron and the origin of the Hidden God Sect. However, the Heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron is one of the clan protection divine artifacts of the Imperial Court, and it has a very strong restraining power against the devil race. However, this item is a divine artifact and not easy to control. Therefore, the Imperial Court will not use it unless it is absolutely necessary. Our sect was born to protect the Heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron, and it is very likely that we will die for it in the future." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing shook his head and said with a smile, "Sect Master Xue, there is no need to worry. I am here to discuss this matter with you in order to take away the Heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron. The Emperor has already given the order to give this cauldron to me. If I take it away, the Hidden God Sect will no longer need to protect it." Xue Ruoyu revealed a meaningful smile and shook her head lightly. "No, Tianqing, you are wrong. The Hidden God Sect was born to protect the Heavenly Dipper God Fire Cauldron, so it is natural that we will stay with it. Later, This old woman will help you refine the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron and obtain its approval. However, after you obtain the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron, this old woman will give you a big gift. What gift? Ji Tianqing frowned in confusion and asked subconsciously. The hidden god sect. Xue Ruoyu pointed above her head and said in a solemn tone, this old woman will give the entire hidden god sect to you. I can't accept this. Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment, and quickly waved his hand to refuse. Sect Master Xue, the hidden god sect is the blood, sweat, and tears of several generations of your sect. I can't accept your gift. Xue Ruoyu looked at him with a firm gaze and said with an unquestionable tone, this matter is not something that you and I can decide. This is the Emperor's decision, and he has already stated it clearly in the order. Ji Tianqing was speechless. After all, it was the Emperor's order, and he couldn't refute it. After a moment of silence he asked, may I ask Sect Master Xue, what kind of gift are you talking about? Xue Ruoyu revealed a kind smile and explained, as long as you can obtain the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron's approval, the hidden god sect will be under your command and listen to your orders. In the future, when you go to the battlefield to resist the devil race's army, the hidden god sect will follow you to the battlefield and kill your enemies. Of course, you don't have to worry about the affairs of the hidden god sect. Normally, this old woman and the elders of the sect will take care of it, so you won't be distracted. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and felt that this was a good idea, so he nodded in agreement. Many thanks for Sect Master Xue's help. Since this is the Emperor's order, I will follow it. Sect Master Xue, please tell the elders and disciples of your sect that I don't have the time to care about the hidden god sect, and I won't interfere in the sect's affairs. Only when the imperial court needs us to stand up and fight against the devil race and protect the people of the human race, will I command the entire hidden god sect. That's good. Xue Ruoyu saw that he finally agreed and nodded in satisfaction. Ji Tianqing hesitated for a moment and continued. Sect Master Xue, now that the Devil Emperor has returned to the northern desert, the devil race is rising and their forces are growing rapidly. Now the devil race's army is attacking the territories of the three races in a frenzy, trying to sweep across the profound sky continent, kill all living beings of the various races, and unify the world. Chaos has come, and as the domain lord under the imperial court, I naturally have to protect the peace of the region and fight against the devil race's army. In the past year, I have found Emperor Yi and Xiao Wentian and asked them to come out and help me fight against the devil emperor. Emperor Yi and Xiao Wentian have both agreed to this matter, and when I go to the northern desert, they will come out and help me. Today, I sincerely hope that Sect Master Xue can come out of seclusion and join us in resisting and dissolving the demon emperor's conspiracy. After he finished speaking, he looked at Xue Ruoyu with sincerity and bowed deeply. Xue Ruoyu didn't hesitate at all and nodded with a smile. Tianqing, in fact, you don't need to ask this old woman. This old woman will do her best to help you. After all, this is the Emperor's order. Chapter 1336. Seeing Xue Ruoyu agree decisively, Ji Tianqing let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly bowed to express his thanks. Many thanks for Sect Master Xue's help. Sect Master Xue is deeply righteous. This junior can't thank you enough. Xue Ruoyu waved her hand, indicating that he didn't need to be so courteous. She smiled amiably and said, in public, this old one is a trusted subordinate of the monarch. Naturally, I will obey the monarch's orders and help you with all my strength. In private, this old one is Master's fourth disciple, and you are the successor of Master's legacy. You are equivalent to this old one's junior brother. How can this old one not help you? Moreover, this old one also hates the devil race to the bone. I wish that I could be like Master, holding a 3-foot-long divine sword and slaughtering all the devils in the world. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked with interest, oh? Sect Master Xue also has a blood feud with the devil race? That's right. Xue Ruoyu nodded and explained in a low voice. This old one was born in a family of generals since young. 3 generations of my ancestors were all valiant generals of the imperial court and had outstanding military achievements. When this old one was young, the devil race wreaked havoc in the world. The devil emperor invaded the central state and wantonly massacred the common people. This old one's grandfather, father, and uncles all died on the battlefield under the blades of the devil race experts. Later on, this old one's entire family was besieged by the devil race experts. More than 300 people in the family were killed. It was the monarch who saved this old one, allowing this old one to survive. Later on, this old one met Master. It was Master's guidance and teaching that allowed this old one to become a martial expert and have today's achievements. Speaking up to here, Xueqi Ruoyu paused for a moment. Recalling those tragic past events, even after 1,000 years, she was still filled with grief and indignation. Her words were filled with monstrous hatred towards the devil race. After Master left the profound sky continent, this old one inherited my father's legacy and continued to serve the imperial court loyally. The monarch saw that this old one was talented and intelligent and was not suitable to lead an army in battle. Thus, he gave this old one a top-secret mission. Thus, this old one joined the divine hidden sect and started as an inner sect elder. 300 years ago, I was promoted to sect master and personally guarded the divine cauldron. After listening to Xueqi Ruoyu's narration of the past, Ji Tianqing finally understood the whole story. No wonder the water patriarch listened to the imperial court and guarded the cauldron for the imperial court. He hid his identity here for hundreds of years and was still loyal. I really didn't expect that sect master Xueqi, Kenshin and the monarch had such a relationship. If that's the case, the celestial emperor must have thought long and hard before sending me to the hidden god sect to look for sect master Xueqi and obtain the heavenly dipper god fire cauldron. Sex. That's why she's Willing's cauldron of Suvs. Sect masters. After that, the sect understood the sect well. To understand, the master, twos. The sect, nos. T. Ji Tianqing listened patiently. He had a deeper understanding of Xueqi Ruoyu's past. Just as the old and the young were chatting happily, a stream of light suddenly flew over from the top of the cave and landed in front of Xueqi Ruoyu. Xueqi Ruoyu stretched out her hand and caught the stream of light in her palm. She opened her palm and saw that it was a communication jade slip with a seal on it. This was a secret jade slip that the first elder and second elder used only in emergencies. She raised her eyebrows and released a strand of consciousness from her primordial spirit. She entered the jade slip and checked the information inside. After a while, she put away the communication jade slip and glanced at Ji Tianqing with a strange expression. Ji Tianqing saw the change in her expression and guessed that it was probably a jade slip sent by the sect elder of the hidden god sect. The fact that he had injured the old drunkard and trespassed into the forbidden grounds must have been exposed. As expected, Xueqi Ruoyu looked at him with a playful expression and asked, Tianqing, before you trespassed into the forbidden grounds, did you beat up the left protector? Cough. Ji Tianqing was a little embarrassed. He explained with a smile, Sect Master Xueqi, I had no choice. Please forgive me. The left protector was guarding the mountain gate. He didn't know the relationship between the hidden god sect and the imperial court, so he stopped me from entering. Fortunately, I knew Shi Zhongjian and was able to enter the sect. But when I went to talk to the second elder about this, the second elder didn't know. I didn't know when the second elder would report this to you, so I had no choice but to trespass into the forbidden grounds. But I didn't expect that the left protector had his eyes on me. When I was breaking the formation, he suddenly appeared and wanted to catch me and punish me. I had no choice but to agree to leave Sunless Peak with him and fight outside. But don't worry, the left protector and I were fighting like gentlemen. We only exchanged 2 or 3 moves. Xueqi Ruoyu watched him explain the matter without stopping, and she was actually watching with great interest. There was a gentle smile on the corner of her mouth. After he finished speaking, Xueqi Ruoyu chuckled and asked in return, a battle between gentlemen. You've only exchanged 2 or 3 moves, and you've already beaten him black and blue, leaving him covered in wounds and charred like charcoal? The great elder sent a message saying that the left protector's injuries were quite serious. He would need at least 3 to 5 years to recover. Ji Tianqing rubbed the tip of his nose and smiled awkwardly. About this, I wasn't too sure about the left protector's strength. I didn't hold back at that time and used 60% of my strength. If I knew he was so weak, I would have only used 40% of my strength. Xueqi Ruoyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She shook her head and said, Sigh, your little junior brother is really too monstrous. You are so young, but you have the strength of a half-step primordial spirit realm. You are twice as strong as the left protector. This is really shocking and rare. Now that I think about it, when Master was your age, his strength was far inferior to yours. Ji Tianqing just smiled and didn't say anything. The burial of heaven had also said something similar. Even when Kenshin was his age, he wasn't as monstrous as him. His strength and talent had already surpassed Kenshin's. After a moment of silence, Xue Ruoyu said in a gentle tone, Tianqing, even if the left protector was injured by you, you don't have to blame yourself. I won't blame you either. Who asked him to be unrestrained and drown his sorrows with alcohol all day long? He even ended up in such a sorry state. I look down on this kind of man the most. He gave up on himself after suffering a setback and thought that he could soften my heart. Only someone like Master who would rather break than submit and press forward courageously is a true hero, a peerless swordsman. With a 3-foot Qing Feng sword in hand, he dares to call the sun and moon to change the sky. Seeing Xue Ruoyu's disdain for the old drunkard, Ji Tianqing felt sympathy for the poor old drunkard. Sect Master Xue, actually, the left protector is also a sentimental person. He is too emotional, which is why he was hurt so badly. He suffered a setback and was ridiculed by others. He would rather resign from the position of protector but still stay at the mountain gate of the Hidden God sect. He can't let go of you and wants to protect you for the rest of his life. Xue Ruoyu frowned and said with anger, Tianqing, you actually know about this? It must be that talkative brat Shi Zhongjian. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.